The Montana wind carried dust and the smell of failure the day Caleb Stone first saw Hartley Ranch. 27 years old, 3 days without a shower, everything he owned in a canvas duffel bag that had seen better wars than he had. The Marine Corps had spit him out 6 months earlier with a dishonorable discharge and a head full of nightmares that made sleep something other men did. The gambling debts had found him in Denver, in Cheyenne, in Billings. Now he was here, at the end of a dirt road that looked like it led nowhere, because nowhere was the only place left to go. The ranch house sat small and weathered against the mountains, white paint peeling like old skin. A barn the color of dried blood, pastures stretching out in every direction, cattle moving slow as clouds across grass that had somehow stayed green despite the August heat. Caleb had never seen this much empty space, never felt this kind of silence. It made his hands shake worse than they already did. A man stood on the porch, 60, maybe older, hard to tell with men made from work and weather. Tall, lean, wearing jeans and a shirt that had been washed too many times to remember their original color. He watched Caleb approach the way you watch something that might bite. Caleb stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. The man looked down at him. Neither spoke for what felt like a long time. "You the one called about work?" The man's voice had gravel in it. "Yes, sir, Caleb Stone." "Owen Hartley," no hand extended. "What makes you think you can work a ranch?" "I can learn." "That ain't what I asked." Caleb shifted the duffel bag. His shirt was stuck to his back with sweat. "I don't know anything about ranching, but I can work hard. I need a job." Owen studied him like he was a fence post that might be rotten. "You been drinking?" "No, sir." "You high on something?" "No, sir." "You running from the law?" Caleb hesitated. Owen caught it. "I'll take that as a maybe. What branch?" "Marines, Gulf War." "Discharge?" Another hesitation. "Dishonorable, hit an officer." Owen's expression didn't change. "He deserve it." "I thought so at the time." "You think so now?" Caleb looked at the mountains, at the cattle, at anything but Owen's eyes. "I don't know what I think anymore." Owen was quiet for a moment. Then he pointed toward a small cabin about 50 yards from the main house. "That's the foreman's cabin, hasn't been used in 2 years. You can sleep there. I'll pay you $400 a month plus meals. You work 6 days, sunrise to sunset. You slack off, you're gone. You steal, you're gone. You show up drunk or high, you're gone. You understand?" "Yes, sir." "I don't hire drifters, but I'll give you 1 week. Prove you can work, you stay. Prove you can't, you leave by sundown on day 7. Fair." It was more fairness than Caleb had seen in 6 months. Fair. "Be in the barn at 5 tomorrow morning. Don't be late." Owen turned and walked back into his house without another word. The screen door banged shut behind him. Caleb stood there holding his duffel bag, wondering if he'd just been hired or tested or both. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of hay and cattle and something else he couldn't name. Something that might have been hope if hope was something he still knew how to recognize. The foreman's cabin was 1 room, rough wood floor, a cot with a thin mattress, a table, a chair, a wood stove. No bathroom. Owen had pointed to an outhouse and a pump well on the walk over. The cabin smelled like dust and mice and abandonment. Caleb dropped his duffel bag on the cot and sat down. The mattress creaked. Through the single window he could see the main house, dark now except for 1 light in what must be the kitchen. He watched that light for a while, then lay back on the cot and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. It never did any more without help, and he'd run out of help 3 states ago. So he lay there listening to the wind and the distant sound of cattle and his own heart beating too fast. Somewhere past midnight he heard coyotes. The sound made him think of Iraq, of things he tried not to think about. He got up and sat at the table until the sky started turning gray. The barn was cold and dark when he walked in at 4:45. He couldn't find a light switch, stood there trying to let his eyes adjust. Then the overhead lights snapped on. Owen was already there, standing by a workbench, wearing the same clothes or clothes exactly like them. "You're early. Good. Grab those gloves." The first day was harder than anything Caleb had done since boot camp, mucking stalls, hauling hay, fixing a fence line that ran for what felt like miles. Owen showed him once, expected him to remember, said nothing when Caleb made mistakes except to point and say, "Do it again." By noon, Caleb's hands were blistered through the gloves. By 3, his back felt like broken glass. By sunset, he could barely stand. Owen looked at him across the last fence post they'd planted. "You coming back tomorrow?" "Yes, sir." "We'll see." That night Caleb's hands shook so bad he couldn't hold a fork. He ate beans cold from the can, fell onto the cot and slept for 11 hours straight. No nightmares, just the deep black nothing of exhaustion. The second day was worse. The third day Caleb moved slow as an old man, everything hurting. The fourth day Owen had him help with the cattle, teaching him things with no patience and few words. Caleb tried to pay attention, tried to remember, mostly just tried not to quit. The fifth day it rained and they worked in mud that sucked at their boots. The sixth day Owen sent him to fix the irrigation system alone, and Caleb broke something he wasn't supposed to break, and Owen looked at him like he was weighing whether to fire him or just shoot him. "Can you fix it?" Owen asked. "I don't know. I can try." "Then try." Caleb spent 4 hours figuring out what he'd broken and how to fix it. Owen checked his work, said nothing, walked away. Caleb took that as good enough. The seventh day came. Caleb woke before the alarm he'd set on his watch, sat on the edge of the cot, and waited to see if Owen would tell him to leave. At 5:15, there was a knock on the cabin door. Owen stood there holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Thought you might want this before we start." He handed Caleb a mug. Caleb took it. The coffee was black and hot and tasted like it had been made in the same pot since 1970. It was the best thing he'd ever tasted. "You staying?" Owen asked. "If you'll have me." Owen nodded. "Then let's get to work." That was how it started. No contract, no handshake, just work and coffee and a man who asked no more questions about who Caleb had been before he arrived. The days blurred together. Caleb learned to read the weather by the sky, learned to know which cows were pregnant and which were sick, learned that Owen never gave compliments but would nod sometimes when you did something right, and that nod meant more than 1,000 words. 3 months in, Caleb started to sleep better. 6 months in, his hands stopped shaking. A year in, he realized he hadn't thought about gambling in weeks. The ranch had rhythms. The work had patterns. You did the same things the same way and the ranch responded, or it didn't, and when it didn't you figured out why and you fixed it. There was a cleanness to it, a fairness. You got out what you put in. Owen never talked about himself, never mentioned family, never mentioned the past, worked beside Caleb in a silence that somehow wasn't uncomfortable. Sometimes in the evening Caleb would see him sitting on the porch of the main house looking out at the land, and there was something in his posture that looked like grief. But Owen never spoke it out loud, so Caleb never asked. The second year brought drought. The grass turned brown. The cattle prices dropped. Owen sold off 1/3 of the herd, paying careful attention to which ones went and which ones stayed. He explained his thinking to Caleb in short sentences that assumed Caleb was smart enough to fill in the gaps. Caleb learned that ranching wasn't about this year or next year, but about all the years after that, about sustainability, about not mining the land for everything it had. "Ranch has to last longer than you," Owen said one evening as they watched the sunset turn the brown grass gold. That's the only rule that matters. The third year, Caleb made his first big mistake. A cow was struggling to birth and Caleb panicked, called Owen at 2 in the morning. Owen came out to the barn in his pajamas and boots, took one look at the situation and reached in to turn the calf. It came out alive. The mother survived. Owen washed his hands at the pump. "You did right calling me, but next time you'll know what to do." "What if I don't?" "Then the calf dies and you learn from it. That's ranching." There was a next time. 3 months later, middle of the night, different cow. Caleb didn't call Owen. He remembered what Owen had done, reached in, felt for the calf's position, turned it as gently as he could. It took 20 minutes of sweat and fear. The calf came out wet and perfect. The mother licked it clean. Caleb sat in the straw watching them and felt something in his chest that might have been pride. In the morning, Owen found him asleep in the barn. The calf and mother both fine. "You handle that yourself?" "Yes, sir." Owen nodded, just that, but it was enough. The fourth year, Owen raised his pay to $600 a month. Didn't say why, didn't make a ceremony of it, just left an envelope on Caleb's table with the difference in cash. The fifth year, a developer came to the ranch, showed up in an expensive truck, expensive suit, spread papers across Owen's kitchen table showing what the land could become. Subdivisions, golf courses, mountain views for rich people from California. $3 million, Mr. Hartley. You could retire anywhere you want. Caleb was fixing the porch railing, heard the whole conversation through the open window. Owen looked at the papers for a long time. "No. Sir, this is a generous offer, more than generous. The land isn't even that productive. You're barely breaking even most years." I said no. "Can I ask why?" "Because it's mine, and because breaking even on a ranch is winning." The developer left frustrated. Caleb watched him drive away in a cloud of dust, thought about $3 million, thought about Owen sitting on this porch every evening looking at land that barely paid for itself. He didn't understand, but Owen had his reasons, and Owen's reasons were Owen's business. That same year, the fifth year, Owen's children came to visit. Caleb had known Owen had kids somewhere, had seen a few old photographs in the main house, but they'd never visited in all the time Caleb had been there. Now they came for Owen's 59th birthday, 3 of them, arriving in rental cars from the airport in Billings. Preston was the oldest, 46, a lawyer from Boston. Tall like his father but soft in the way men get soft in offices. He wore expensive casual clothes that looked wrong against the ranch backdrop. His handshake was firm and brief. Vanessa was 43, a property developer from Denver. She looked like she'd been pretty once and was fighting hard to stay that way. Her shoes weren't made for dirt. She smiled at Caleb like he was the help, which he supposed he was. Travis was the youngest at 39, ran some kind of franchise business in Dallas. He was trying to be friendly, asked Caleb questions about the ranch, seemed genuinely interested. Out of the 3, he was the only one who looked at the land like it might be something other than an asset. They stayed for 2 days. Owen cooked a birthday dinner. Caleb was invited but ate fast and left early, sat in his cabin and listened to them talking on the porch through the night air. Their voices carried. "Dad, this place is falling apart. You need to think about selling." That was Preston. "The market's strong right now. I could get you top dollar." Vanessa. "Or you could at least hire more help. You're pushing 60. How long can you keep this up?" Travis. Owen's voice quiet but firm. "Long as I need to." "That's not a plan, Dad." "It's my plan." The conversations went in circles. The children had ideas about modernization, about efficiency, about retirement communities in Arizona. Owen listened to all of it with the same expression he used when checking cattle for illness: patient, unmoved. On the second morning, Preston found Caleb in the barn. "So, you're the one Dad talks about." "He talks about me. He mentions you, says you work hard." Caleb kept oiling the harness he was working on. "I try to." "How long you been here?" "5 years." "And what's your plan? Stay here forever playing cowboy?" Caleb looked at him. Preston had his father's height but none of his hardness. "I'm not playing anything. This is work." "Right, work. For 600 a month and a shack. You know my father's sitting on land worth millions." "I know what the land's worth." "Do you? Because from where I'm standing it looks like you're taking advantage of an old man who's too stubborn to retire." Caleb set down the harness. "Your father's not old, and he's not being taken advantage of. He runs this ranch, I just help." "For how long? Until he dies and you're out on your ass with nothing." "That's not your concern." "Actually it is. He's my father. This is our inheritance. And I don't appreciate some drifter thinking he's part of the family." Caleb stood up. He was 2 inches shorter than Preston but 30 pounds heavier, most of it muscle from 5 years of hard work. "I've never thought I was family. I'm an employee. But I've been here every day for 5 years. Where have you been?" Preston's face went red. "I have a career, a life. I can't just abandon everything to shovel cow shit in Montana." "Nobody asked you to." They stared at each other. Then Preston turned and walked out. He left that afternoon with Vanessa. Travis stayed one more day, helped Caleb fix a section of fence, didn't say much. Before he left, he shook Caleb's hand. "Don't take it personal. Preston's just worried about Dad." "Seems like he's more worried about money." Travis smiled sad. "Yeah, maybe, but Dad's not making it easy. He won't talk to us about the future, won't make plans, just keeps working like he's 40. Maybe work is his plan." "That's what I'm afraid of." They left. The ranch got quiet again. Owen never mentioned the visit. Caleb never brought it up. They went back to work. The years stacked up like hay bales. Year 6 brought a wildfire that threatened the northern pastures. Caleb and Owen and every rancher within 20 miles fought it for 3 days straight. They saved most of the land. Owen said nothing about it afterward, but he raised Caleb's pay to $700 a month. Year 7, Owen had a stroke. Not bad, but bad enough. He was 64 in the barn, reached for a tool, and his right hand wouldn't work. Caleb found him sitting on a hay bale looking at his hand like it belonged to someone else. "Can't feel my fingers." Caleb drove him to the hospital in Billings. The doctors said he was lucky, said it was minor, said he'd recover most of the function. They kept him for 3 days. Caleb ran the ranch alone. Owen's children flew in, separately, stayed in hotels, visited in shifts. They talked to the doctors about long-term care, about assisted living, about selling the ranch. Owen listened to all of it from his hospital bed with his eyes closed. On the 3rd day, he checked himself out against medical advice. Caleb picked him up at the entrance. "Take me home." "The doctor said you should stay another week." "I don't care what they said, take me home." They drove back to the ranch in silence. Owen's right hand was weak but working. He could hold things if he concentrated. That evening he sat on his porch like always, looking at the land. Caleb sat with him. "Kids want me to sell," Owen said. "I heard. They think I'm being stubborn." "Are you?" Owen was quiet for a while. "Maybe, or maybe I just know what matters." Caleb didn't ask what that meant. Owen wouldn't have answered anyway. For the next 6 months, Caleb ran most of the operation. Owen supervised, made decisions, but couldn't do the heavy work anymore. His right side never quite came all the way back. He moved slower, tired easier. He turned 65. The children called weekly at first, then monthly, then hardly at all. Caleb stopped expecting them to visit. Year 9, the recession hit. Beef prices crashed. The ranch barely made enough to cover feed and maintenance. Caleb's paychecks stopped coming. He didn't ask about them. Owen looked older than he had a year ago, worn down by something more than the stroke. One morning in November, Owen called Caleb up to the main house. "I can't pay you right now. Market's bad. Prices are bad. I've got enough to keep the ranch running, but not enough for wages." "I understand. I'll make it up to you when things turn around." "I'm not worried about it." Owen looked at him. "You should be. You got no savings, no prospects. You're 37 years old working for free." "I've got a place to live and food to eat. That's more than I had 10 years ago." "That's not enough for a man." "It's enough for me." Owen studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You're a better man than you think you are, Caleb." It was the first time Owen had said anything like that. Caleb didn't know what to say back, so he just nodded and went back to work. 4 months later, the prices recovered. Owen paid Caleb everything he owed plus interest. Caleb tried to refuse the interest. Owen insisted. That was the end of the conversation. By the 12th year, Owen was 69 and slowing down more. He'd had another minor stroke, needed an afternoon nap most days, but his mind was still sharp when it needed to be. He taught Caleb the business side of ranching, how to read market reports, how to time sales, how to negotiate with buyers. Caleb learned it the same way he'd learned everything else, by watching and listening and asking few questions. The work continued. Year 13, 14, 15. Owen turned 72. His health was clearly declining now, not just from strokes but from age and wear. He moved like a man whose body was giving out in small increments. Good days and bad days. On the good days, he was the same Owen who'd hired Caleb 15 years earlier. On the bad days, he forgot things, called Caleb by names of men who'd worked the ranch decades ago, got confused about what season it was. In the summer of year 15, 3 years before he died, Owen hired a young hand. Wyatt, 21 years old, fresh out of foster care, angry at everything. He reminded Caleb of himself at 27. Owen was too weak to train him properly anymore, so he put Wyatt under Caleb's supervision. "Teach him what I taught you." Caleb started Wyatt the same way Owen had started him. Hard work, few words, high expectations. Wyatt struggled, complained, almost quit a dozen times in the first month. Caleb let him struggle, let him complain, didn't try to make it easier. Owen watched from the porch, said nothing, nodded approval when Caleb handled it right. At the end of the first month, Wyatt was still there. At the end of 3 months, he was starting to understand the rhythms. At the end of 6 months, he could handle most tasks without supervision. Caleb saw Owen watching them work together one afternoon and caught something on the old man's face that might have been satisfaction. Owen's decline accelerated. Another stroke in year 16, more serious. The doctors said his brain was bleeding slowly, little strokes they couldn't prevent. He'd have good days and bad days. The good days would get fewer. There was no treatment, no cure, just time running out. Owen's children visited after that stroke, stayed longer this time. They sat around the kitchen table with papers and plans, nursing homes, memory care facilities, power of attorney. Owen sat with them but didn't engage, looked out the window at the land while they talked about his future like he wasn't there. Preston pulled Caleb aside on the second day. "He's not going to get better. You understand that?" "I understand. We're going to need to make decisions. About the ranch, about care, about everything." That's between you and your father. Is it? Because he listens to you more than he listens to us. Caleb met his eyes. Maybe that's because I'm here. Preston's jaw tightened. We're his children. Then act like it. Come more than once every 3 years. Call more than once a month. Give a damn about something other than what you're going to inherit. You don't know anything about our family. I know your father's been alone for 17 years except for the people who work this ranch. I know he built something that matters and you three can't wait to sell it. I know that when he needed help I was here and you weren't. Preston stepped closer. You think you're his son. You think 20 years of manual labor makes you family. You're an employee, Caleb, that's all. And when he dies you'll get your severance and that's it. This ranch, this land, everything he built, that's ours. Blood matters. Remember that. He walked away. Caleb stood there feeling something dark and familiar rise in his chest. Anger. The kind that used to get him in trouble. He breathed through it, let it pass. Preston was wrong, but arguing wouldn't change anything. The ranch belonged to Owen. What Owen did with it was Owen's choice. The children left. Owen recovered enough to move around again, but the sharpness was going. Some days he forgot things, got confused, needed help with basics. Other days he was perfectly clear, running the operation with the same steady hand he always had. Caleb and Wyatt learned to work with both versions, to gently redirect on the bad days, to step back on the good days. On one of the good days, late summer of the 17th year, Owen called Caleb up to the porch after dinner. "Sit down." Caleb sat. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting everything gold and red. "You know I'm dying," Owen said. "Everyone's dying. Don't get philosophical on me. I'm dying faster than most. Could be months, could be years, but it's coming." Caleb said nothing. "I want you to know something. You were 27 when you got here. Broken. Running from something. I gave you work because I needed help and you needed saving. Figured we'd use each other for a season and then you'd move on. I didn't move on. No, you stayed. Through drought and fire and recession and all the years nobody asked you to stay. You stayed because this place mattered to you. The work mattered. That means something. It's just work. It's never just work. Work is who you are. How you work is how you live. You work honest. You work hard. You work like the land matters more than you do. That's rare." Owen looked at him. "I'm telling you this now because I'm not good at saying things and I might not be clear enough to say them later. You're a good man, Caleb. Better than you think. You earned everything you got here. Remember that." Caleb's throat felt tight. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, just remember it." They sat in silence while the sun finished setting and the first stars came out. Caleb wanted to ask what would happen to the ranch, what would happen to him, what Owen's plans were. But asking felt like pushing, and he'd never pushed Owen for anything. So he just sat there, and eventually Owen stood up and went inside, and Caleb walked back to the foreman's cabin through the dark. The final year was harder. Owen's bad days outnumbered his good days. He needed help getting dressed, needed reminders about meals, sometimes didn't recognize where he was. Caleb became caretaker on top of foreman. Wyatt took over more of the daily operations. The ranch ran on momentum and muscle memory, Caleb making decisions Owen used to make, trying to think the way Owen would think. The children called more often, asking about symptoms, asking about decline, asking in ways that felt like they were calculating timelines. Caleb gave them facts without emotion. Owen was declining. The doctor visits were more frequent. No, there was nothing to be done. January of year 20 came cold and hard. Owen caught pneumonia. The hospital kept him for a week. He came home weaker, needing oxygen, sleeping most of the day. Caleb set up a bed in the living room so Owen could look out at the land. On clear days, they'd sit together, Owen in his bed, Caleb in a chair, not talking much, just being. On a Tuesday morning in late January, Caleb came in with breakfast and found Owen still. Peaceful. The oxygen tank still running. The window showing the land in winter light, cattle dark shapes against white snow. Caleb set down the breakfast tray, sat in the chair, looked at Owen's face, finally relaxed, finally free of whatever had been eating at him all these years. He sat there for a long time before he called anyone, letting the silence settle, letting the moment be what it was. Owen Hartley was 74 years old. He'd lived on this ranch for all but 4 years of his life. He'd built something that mattered, and now he was gone. The funeral was small. Owen hadn't wanted a service, but his children insisted. People came from all over the valley, ranchers who'd known Owen for decades, people who'd bought cattle from him, people he'd helped in quiet ways. Caleb stood in the back and listened to Preston give a eulogy about a father he barely knew. Vanessa cried in a way that seemed practiced. Travis looked genuinely sad but lost, like he wasn't sure why he felt what he felt. After the service, people came up to Caleb. "He thought the world of you," Ben Sawyer said. Ben ran the ranch to the east, had known Owen for 40 years. "He was a good man," Nora from the feed store said, "and you were good to him." "What are you going to do now?" someone else asked. Caleb didn't have an answer. He'd been so focused on taking care of Owen, running the ranch, making it through each day, that he hadn't thought about after. What came after? The will reading was scheduled for a week later. Russell Kane, Owen's lawyer, called to confirm Caleb would be there. Caleb said he would. He didn't expect anything. Owen had children. The ranch would go to them. That's how these things worked. Caleb had 20 years of wages and a cabin he'd lived in and memories of a hard man who'd given him a second chance. That was more than he'd deserved. The day of the will reading came. Russell Kane's office in Billings, wood paneling and law degrees on the walls. Preston, Vanessa, and Travis were already there, dressed like they'd come from important places. Preston in a suit that probably cost more than Caleb made in 6 months. Vanessa in black that looked expensive and deliberate. Travis in slacks and a button-up, uncomfortable but trying. Caleb wore his cleanest jeans and a shirt he'd ironed that morning. Dirt still under his fingernails from the morning's work. He'd been up since 4 feeding cattle because cattle don't stop needing food just because the man who owned them died. Russell Kane nodded to everyone, opened a folder, began to read. Legal language, formal declarations, Owen being of sound mind. Caleb only half listened. He was thinking about the ranch, about Wyatt handling things alone, about the fence that needed mending in the north pasture. Then Russell got to the assets, and Caleb paid attention. The main ranch property, comprising 1,200 acres, including the main house, barn, all equipment and livestock. I leave to be divided equally among my children Preston Hartley, Vanessa Hartley, and Travis Hartley. Preston leaned forward. Vanessa didn't look up from her phone. Travis sat very still. To Caleb Stone, who has served as foreman of this ranch faithfully for 20 years, I leave the sum of $10,000 and all personal effects currently in my bedroom. The words hit like a fist. $10,000, 20 years, personal effects. Caleb felt something crack open in his chest. He'd known, logically, that the ranch would go to the children, but some small, stupid part of him had hoped, had believed that maybe Owen had seen him as more than an employee, that maybe 2 decades of loyalty meant something. Preston was already talking. "We'll need to move quickly on the sale. I've been in contact with Mountain Vista Development. They're offering $8.5 million for the complete property. Caleb, we'll need you to vacate the foreman's cabin by the end of the month. We'll give you an additional $2,000 for your trouble and provide references for future employment. Caleb stared at him. You're selling. Of course we're selling. None of us are ranchers. This is business. Your father built this ranch. His father before him. His grandfather homesteaded this land. And now it's ours, Preston said, and we're choosing to liquidate the asset. It's worth more as residential development than it ever was as a cattle ranch. 8.5 million split 3 ways. Everyone benefits. Except the ranch. The ranch is property, Caleb. It doesn't have feelings. Vanessa finally looked up from her phone. We appreciate everything you did for Dad, really, but this is a family decision. Travis said nothing. He looked at Caleb with something that might have been apology, but he didn't speak. Russell Kane cleared his throat. There are a few administrative matters to handle. Transfer documents, property assessments. Caleb, you'll need to provide an inventory of all personal effects in Owen's bedroom within 2 weeks. That's my inheritance, Caleb's voice came out flat. Old boots and photographs. Those were your uncle's instructions. He wasn't my uncle. Figure of speech. The will is clear. $10,000 in personal effects. I'm sorry if you expected more. Caleb stood up. Preston was still talking about logistics, about clearing the barn, about timeline for the development company. Vanessa was back on her phone. Travis was looking at his hands. Caleb walked out. He heard Preston calling after him something about keys and paperwork. He kept walking. Out of the building, into the parking lot, into his truck. 20 years old, rust starting at the wheel wells, but it ran. He started it up and drove. The highway back to the ranch blurred. His hands were shaking on the wheel, that old familiar shake he hadn't felt in years. 20 years. He'd given 20 years. Sunrise to sunset. Through drought and fire and flood. Through Owen's strokes and decline and dying. He'd stayed when everyone else left. He'd loved that ranch, loved the work, loved the life. And Owen had left him $10,000 and permission to sort through old clothes. The ranch appeared on the horizon. Home. Except it wasn't his home. It had never been his home. He'd just been allowed to live there while he was useful. He parked in front of the foreman's cabin. Wyatt came out of the barn. How'd it go? Caleb looked at him. Wyatt was 24 now, strong from 3 years of ranch work, no longer the angry kid who'd shown up. Caleb had taught him everything Owen had taught Caleb, and now it was all for nothing. They're selling. We've got 30 days. Wyatt's face went hard. That's bullshit. That's business. Owen wouldn't have wanted this. Owen's dead. What he wanted doesn't matter anymore. Caleb went into his cabin and closed the door. Sat on the cot he'd slept on for 20 years. Looked around at the rough wood walls, the wood stove, the single window with a view of the main house and the mountains beyond. He'd built a life here. Not a big life, not an important life, but a real one. Work that mattered, days that had purpose. And all of it was ending because he'd been stupid enough to think loyalty was worth something. He sat there as the sun set. Sat there as it got dark. Sat there until midnight when he finally lay back on the cot and stared at the ceiling and tried not to feel anything at all. 20 years of dust. That's all it had been. 20 years of sweat and work and believing he was building something. But you can't build on land you don't own. You can't build on borrowed time. In the morning, he'd start packing. He'd inventory Owen's personal effects like a good employee. He'd clear out the barn and hand over the keys and take his $10,000 and find somewhere else to be. But tonight he just lay there in the dark, listening to the wind, and let himself feel what 20 years of nothing felt like. Morning came too early and too bright. Caleb woke on the cot with his boots still on, fully dressed, neck stiff from the angle he'd slept. For a moment he didn't remember. Then it all crashed back. The will reading, $10,000, 30 days to vacate, 20 years meaning nothing. He sat up slow, joints protesting. Through the window the ranch looked the same as it always did. Cattle in the pastures, mountains in the distance, sky that impossible Montana blue, but it wasn't the same. It would never be the same. In 30 days this would belong to developers. The barn would be torn down. The pastures would become cul-de-sacs. Everything Owen had built would be erased for someone else's profit. Wyatt was already in the barn when Caleb got there. The kid looked up from mucking a stall, read Caleb's face, and went back to work without a word. Sometimes silence was the only kindness that fit. They worked through the morning feeding cattle, checking water lines, all the normal rhythms that felt suddenly temporary. Every fence post Caleb touched, he thought this won't be here in 6 months. Every cow he checked he thought someone else will sell you. The work had always been his anchor. Now it felt like standing on ice that was already cracking. At noon Ben Sawyer's truck pulled up. Ben climbed out slow, a man in his 60s who moved like his back had been broken and healed wrong more than once. He'd ranched the land east of Hartley Ranch for 40 years. He and Owen had been friends in that quiet way men who respect each other's work are friends. Heard about the will, Ben said. No preamble, no small talk. News travels. In a valley this small, hell, I knew before you got back from Billings. Ben looked out at the land. Owen's kids are selling to Mountain Vista. That's the plan. Development company. They'll subdivide the whole thing. Premium Montana living for rich people from California who want to pretend they're cowboys on weekends. I know what they'll do. Ben spat in the dust. It's wrong. Owen would be sick. Owen's dead. That doesn't make it right. Ben turned to look at him. What are you going to do? What can I do? I'm an employee. I get $10,000 and a month to find somewhere else to be. 20 years and that's all. That's all. Ben shook his head. There's got to be more to this. Owen wasn't stupid. He knew what his kids would do. He had to have some kind of plan. If he did, he didn't share it with me. They stood in silence. A hawk circled overhead. Somewhere a cow lowed. Normal sounds. The sounds Caleb had woken up to for 20 years. You need anything, you call me, Ben said finally. A place to stay, a job, whatever. You're good people, Caleb. You'll land on your feet. Appreciate it. Ben drove away. Caleb went back to work, but Ben's words stuck. Owen wasn't stupid. He'd planned everything else in his life with careful precision. Had he really left the ranch to children who'd sell it without a second thought? Had he really left Caleb with nothing after 2 decades? That afternoon Nora from the feed store came by. She brought a casserole, the kind of thing people bring when someone dies and they don't know what else to do. She was 55, had known Owen since before his wife died, had helped Caleb countless times over the years with supplies on credit when the ranch was short on cash. I'm sorry, Caleb, this whole thing stinks. It is what it is. No, her voice had steel in it. It's wrong. Owen thought the world of you. Everyone knew it. For his kids to just sweep in and sell everything out from under you, it's disrespectful to his memory. They're his kids. It's their inheritance. You were more his kid than they ever were. You were here, they weren't. Caleb didn't know what to say to that. Nora squeezed his arm, left the casserole, and drove off. Caleb put the casserole in the foreman's cabin and stared at it. Tuna noodle. Owen's favorite. Nora remembered. But Owen's actual children probably didn't even know what their father liked to eat. The calls started that evening. Russell Kane first, apologizing for how the will reading had gone, saying if Caleb needed help with paperwork or references he'd be happy to assist. Then Preston, all business, talking about timelines and inventory requirements, and the need to have all equipment cataloged by the end of the week. His voice had that tone people use when they're trying to be reasonable about something fundamentally unreasonable. We're not trying to be difficult, Caleb. This is just business. The development company needs a clean title transfer. That means everything accounted for. I'm sure you understand. I understand fine. Good. We've arranged for an appraiser to come by Friday. Please make sure all buildings are accessible. The buildings are always accessible. I work here. Right, of course. Well, just make sure you're available to show them around. Preston hung up. Caleb sat at the small table in his cabin and felt the walls pressing in. An appraiser, coming to value everything Owen had built so it could be sold and torn down. And Caleb was supposed to help. Supposed to smile and open doors and pretend his heart wasn't breaking. He didn't sleep that night either. Lay on the cot listening to the wind and thinking about all the things he should have said to Preston, all the things he should have asked Owen while the old man was still alive. Why didn't you leave me something real? Why did you let me believe I mattered? Why did you make me love this place if you knew I'd have to leave it? But Owen was gone and couldn't answer. The only thing left was work and a deadline. The next morning, Caleb started the inventory. Preston had sent a detailed list of what needed to be cataloged: equipment, livestock, property improvements, and personal effects in Owen's bedroom. That was Caleb's inheritance, the personal effects. He'd been putting it off, not wanting to go through Owen's private space, not wanting to sort through the remnants of a life. But it had to be done. The main house felt empty without Owen in it. Caleb had only been inside a handful of times over the years, usually when Owen was sick and needed help. It was a simple house, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room. Furniture that had been there since Owen's father's time. Nothing fancy, nothing wasted, everything functional. Owen's bedroom was at the back. Small window looking out at the north pasture. A bed with a quilt Sarah had made 40 years ago. A dresser, a closet, a nightstand with a reading lamp and a water glass that still had water in it from the last time Owen had been healthy enough to pour it himself. Caleb stood in the doorway for a long moment. This felt like trespass, like going through someone's pockets while they slept, but Preston had been clear. Inventory the personal effects, box them up. That's what employees do. He started with the closet. Work shirts all the same style, all worn soft. Work jeans. A few dress shirts for the rare occasions Owen went to town for something other than ranch business. 2 suits, old, smelling of mothballs. Probably hadn't been worn since Sarah's funeral. Caleb folded everything, packed it in boxes. The Salvation Army could use it. The dresser was harder. Socks and underwear and undershirts in the top drawer. Middle drawer had old photographs. Sarah when she was young, beautiful in that way women in old photographs are beautiful, real and unposed. Owen and Sarah together, him in his army uniform from Korea. The children as babies, as toddlers, as teenagers. A family that had existed once and then slowly dissolved until only Owen was left. Under the photographs were letters. Caleb almost didn't read them, felt like that was going too far. But one was addressed to Owen in Preston's handwriting. The postmark was from 15 years ago. He opened it. Dad, I know you said you don't need money, but I'm sending this anyway. Business has been good. Consider it a loan against my inheritance if that makes it easier for you to accept. Please use it to hire proper help or make repairs or whatever the ranch needs. I worry about you out there alone. Preston. There was a check still in the envelope, $20,000, never cashed. On the back Owen had written in pencil, doesn't understand. Can't buy back time you didn't give. Caleb put the letter back, opened another. This one from Vanessa, dated 8 years ago. "Daddy, I'm sorry I can't make it for Christmas again. Work is crazy and the kids have school. Maybe next summer. I hope you're doing well. The pictures you sent of the ranch look beautiful. Love you, V." Owen had written on that one too, always next summer, never this one. There were a dozen letters like that. Promises to visit, apologies for not calling, checks offered and refused, and Owen's small notations on each one, little epitaphs for a relationship that had died so slowly no one noticed until it was gone. Caleb felt his throat tighten. Owen had kept these letters, had read them, had cared enough to write responses even if the responses were just for himself. The man had been lonelier than Caleb had known, and his children had been too busy to notice. The bottom drawer held more practical things: old tax returns, ranch records, a property deed from when Owen's father had transferred the ranch to him, and at the very back, wrapped in cloth, a journal. Caleb pulled it out, leather cover worn smooth, no lock. He opened to the first page. January 1997. Hired a drifter today. Broken man. Reminds me of myself after Korea. We'll see if he's got fight left in him. Caleb's hands started shaking. This was about him. Owen had kept a journal about him. He sat on the bed and read. January 1997, 1 week later. Caleb stayed the week. Didn't quit even when I made it hard. Works like a man with something to prove. Good sign. March 1997. Caleb handled his first calving today. Lost 2, saved 47. He cried over the 2. I didn't tell him that's what makes a good rancher, caring about the ones you lose. August 1997, 5 months now. He stopped looking over his shoulder, starting to think he might stay. December 1999, Caleb saved the ranch during the fire, organized the whole valley, never asked for recognition, just did what needed doing. He's better than he knows. April 2002, 3rd year of drought. I almost sold to the developer today. $3 million, could retire, could stop fighting this land. Then I watched Caleb mending fence in the north pasture, alone, singing to himself. Happy doing work most men would hate. I remembered why I'm here, called the developer, told him no. Caleb doesn't know he saved this ranch today. Doubt I'll ever tell him. The entries went on, year after year. Owen documenting Caleb's growth, his mistakes, his victories, small observations. Caleb fixed the tractor engine without help today. Caleb gave his paycheck to Wyatt so the kid could buy new boots. Caleb sat with me on the porch last night, didn't say much, but it was good company. Caleb read every entry, 20 years of his life seen through Owen's eyes, and what he saw there wasn't an employee, wasn't hired help. It was something closer to what Caleb had never let himself believe. Family. Owen had thought of him as family. The last entry was from December, 2 months before Owen died. December 2016. Caleb doesn't know yet. I've made arrangements. Russell has the documents. The kids will get the house in the southern section. They can sell that if they want. But the North 500, the land with the water, the land that matters, that's his. He earned it, every acre. I'm only sorry I won't be alive to see his face when he finds out. He'll try to refuse it. He'll think it's charity. It's not. It's justice. Some men inherit land. Some men earn it. Caleb earned it. Caleb read the entry 3 times. Then he flipped forward. No more entries. That was the last one. Owen had died 6 weeks later. The North 500, the land with the water. Russell has the documents. Caleb's heart was hammering. This didn't match what Russell had read at the will reading. The will had said everything to Preston, Vanessa, and Travis. Nothing about a northern section. Nothing about land for Caleb. He kept searching the drawer. At the very back, taped to the underside, was an envelope. His name on the front in Owen's handwriting. His hands shook as he opened it. Caleb. If you're reading this in my bedroom like I specified, you followed instructions. Good. Now go to the barn. Southwest corner behind the old tack wall, there's a loose board 3 feet up from the ground. Check there. And Caleb, you earned every damn thing you find. Don't let anyone tell you different. Oh wait. Caleb stood up so fast the journal fell to the floor. The barn, southwest corner, loose board. He was out the door and running before he'd fully processed what he was doing. The barn was cool and dim after the bright sunlight outside. Wyatt looked up from where he was repairing a bridle. "Boss, you okay?" Caleb didn't answer. He went straight to the southwest corner. The tack wall was where they'd always kept the old saddles, the leather gear that was too worn to use but too good to throw away. He started pulling things down. Wyatt came over. "What are you looking for?" "Loose board 3 feet up." "What?" Caleb ran his hands along the wall. There, he could feel it. A board that didn't sit quite flush with the others. He pulled. It came away easy. Behind it was a gap in the wall, and inside the gap was a metal box. Caleb pulled it out. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely work the latch. Wyatt was staring. "What is that?" "I don't know yet." The latch opened. Inside the box were documents, legal papers, property surveys, and another letter from Owen. Caleb unfolded the first document. At the top, in formal legal language, deed of trust. Established September 2002. He scanned down. The document established a trust transferring ownership of the northern 500 acres of Hartley Ranch, specifically the section including the natural spring and water source, into a separate legal entity, the Hartley Water Trust. Beneficiary, Caleb Stone. Caleb's vision blurred. He blinked hard, read it again. 500 acres, the water source, his name. The property survey showed the ranch divided. Southern 700 acres, including the main house and barn, going to Preston, Vanessa, and Travis as stated in the will. Northern 500 acres, marked clearly on the map, belonging to the trust, belonging to him. He'd owned this land for 15 years. Owen had put it in trust in 2002, the same year he'd refused the developer's offer. The same year the journal entry said Caleb had saved the ranch. Owen had given him 500 acres and never said a word. Wyatt was reading over his shoulder. "Holy shit, you own part of the ranch." "I own the part with the water." That's when it hit him. The northern section had the only natural spring on the property, all the water rights. The southern 700 acres, the part Preston and Vanessa and Travis had inherited, depended entirely on water from the northern section. Without access to that water, their land was worth a fraction of what they thought it was worth. Owen hadn't left him nothing. Owen had left him everything that mattered, and he'd structured it so perfectly that Preston and Vanessa and Travis wouldn't know until they tried to sell. Caleb opened the second letter. Owen's handwriting, stronger than it had been in his last years. This letter was older. "Caleb, by now you found the deed. Here's what you need to know. 2002, developer offered me $3 million. I almost sold. Ranch was struggling. Kids were gone. Sarah was dead. What was I holding on for? Then I watched you that spring. Watched you birth calves at 2 in the morning in freezing rain. Watched you mend fence in 100-degree heat. Watched you love this land the way I loved it. The way my father loved it. The way it deserves to be loved. So I divided the ranch. Gave the kids the house and southern acres, valuable enough they can sell or keep, their choice. But the northern 500, the land with the water source, the best grazing, the original homestead, that's yours. Put it in trust that day. You've owned it for 15 years, just didn't know it. Why not tell you? Same reason I never said good job. You'd think it was charity. You'd doubt yourself. You'd wonder if you earned it. This way, no doubt. You worked 20 years thinking you'd get nothing. You did it anyway. That's what makes you worthy. My kids are blood. You're my legacy. There's a difference. The trust is ironclad. Russell Kane filed at County Records 2002. They can't touch it. They can't sell it. It's yours, period. 500 acres at current value, easy 4 million. But it ain't about money, is it? It's about the work, the land, the life. Build something good, Caleb. Take on young workers like I took you. Pass it on. That's how ranches last. And when my kids come whining, and they will, you tell them this. I gave them what they valued, money. I gave you what you valued, land. Fair is fair. One more thing. Under the floorboard in the original homestead cabin, your 500 acres, there's a box. Open it when you're ready to build. You were the son who stayed. That counts for everything. Owen Hartley. Caleb read the letter twice. 3 times. His eyes were wet and he didn't care. Owen had seen him, had known him, had understood what mattered and made sure Caleb got it. Not as charity, as payment, as recognition, as love in the only language Owen knew how to speak. Wyatt was still staring at the documents. Does this mean what I think it means? It means Owen divided the ranch. They got 700 acres. I got 500, and I got the water. Can they sell without water rights? They can try, but their land's worth maybe 2 million without water access, not the 8.5 they're expecting. Wyatt started laughing, couldn't help it. Owen screwed them. Owen protected what he built. There's a difference. Caleb carefully put the documents back in the metal box. His hands had stopped shaking. The crushing weight that had been sitting on his chest since the will reading was gone. In its place was something he hadn't felt in days: purpose, direction, the sense that he knew what came next. I need to call Russell Kane. He walked back to the foreman's cabin, on his 500 acres. He'd walked this path 10,000 times and never known he was walking on his own land. The thought made him want to laugh and cry at the same time. Russell Kane answered on the second ring. Mr. Kane, it's Caleb Stone. Caleb, what can I do for you? I found something in the barn yesterday, a metal box with deed documents and a trust agreement. There was a pause. Then Russell's voice came back different, lighter, like he'd been waiting for this call. Ah, I was wondering when you'd find that. Owen said you would eventually. He said if you didn't find it, you didn't deserve it, but I knew you would. Is it real? Is it legal? Completely. I filed the trust myself 15 years ago. The northern 500 acres of Hartley Ranch, including all water rights and the original homestead cabin, belong to the Hartley Water Trust. You are the sole beneficiary and trustee. Your cousins have no claim to it whatsoever. They're not my cousins. Figure of speech. The point is, the land is yours, has been since 2002. Preston, Vanessa, and Travis inherited the southern 700 acres, the main house, and all equipment, but they don't own the water source. You do. What happens when they try to sell? The development company will do a title search. They'll discover 300 acres aren't available. They'll discover the available 700 acres don't have independent water rights. Their $8.5 million offer will evaporate. They'll be lucky to get $2 million for landlocked property with no water source. Owen planned this. Owen planned everything. He knew exactly what would happen when he died. Knew his children would swoop in for the money. He wanted to teach them a lesson about greed, and he wanted to reward you for loyalty. Why didn't he just leave me everything in the will? Because then they'd contest it, claim undue influence, mental incompetence, all the usual arguments. This way it's unchallengeable. The trust was established when Owen was 59 and demonstrably sharp. It's been filed and legal for 15 years. There's no contest. You won, Caleb. You just didn't know you were playing. Caleb sat down at his table. 24 hours ago he'd thought he'd lost everything. Now he owned 500 acres of prime Montana ranch land. The land with the water. The land that mattered. Thank you for telling me. Thank Owen, he set it all up. I just filed the paperwork. And Caleb, he was proud of you. He told me so many times you deserved this. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. They hung up. Caleb sat at his table looking at the metal box, the deed, the trust documents, Owen's letter, 20 years of work validated in legal language and an old man's handwriting. His phone rang. Preston. Caleb almost didn't answer. Then he thought about Owen's letter, when my kids come whining, and they will. He answered. Caleb, we need to talk. There's a problem with the title search. What kind of problem? Preston's voice was tight, controlled anger trying to sound reasonable. The development company says 500 acres aren't included in our property. Some kind of trust. Do you know anything about this? Caleb let the silence stretch. Let Preston sit with it. Finally he said, yeah, I know about it. What do you mean you know about it? I mean I found the deed yesterday. In the barn. Owen put 500 acres in trust for me 15 years ago. The northern section, including the water source. The silence on the other end was long. When Preston spoke again, his voice was different, cold. That's impossible. We inherited the ranch, the whole ranch. You inherited 700 acres. I inherited 500, different parts of the will. This is bullshit. We're going to contest this. Go ahead. It's been legally filed for 15 years. Owen was 59 when he established the trust, completely competent. Russell Kane has all the documentation. You can contest it if you want to waste money on lawyers who will tell you the same thing. You don't have a case. You manipulated him. You took advantage of a dying old man. Your father wasn't dying 15 years ago. He was healthy and running a ranch you hadn't visited in 3 years. He made his decision about who deserved what, and he made it when you were 31 years old and still ignoring him. This is our inheritance. This is your father's ranch. He built it. He decided what to do with it. You got 700 acres worth about $2 million. That's more than you earned. Worth $2 million. The development company offered 8.5. That was before they found out you don't own the water rights. Land without water in Montana is worth about as much as land without land. You want to sell, you'll get maybe 2.5 million if you're lucky. Split 3 ways. Congratulations. Preston was breathing hard on the other end of the line. You son of a bitch. Your father was a good man, better than you deserved. He gave you a gift and you're treating it like he stole from you. That tells me everything I need to know about why he left me the water. We'll make you miserable. We'll tie this up in court for years. You do what you need to. I've got work to do. Caleb hung up, sat there looking at his phone. His heart was pounding, but it felt good, felt right. 20 years he'd worked for Owen without asking for more than wages. 20 years he'd stayed when staying was hard, and Owen had seen it, had valued it, had made sure Caleb got what he deserved. The phone rang again. Caleb ignored it, let Preston rage into voicemail. He had 500 acres to think about, a homestead cabin to find, a box under the floorboards waiting to be opened, and a ranch to build. He walked outside. The sun was setting, painting the mountains orange and red. Cattle moving slow across pastures that belonged to him now. Water flowing from a spring that was his to protect. Land stretching out in every direction, some of it his, some of it not, but all of it still here, still ranch land, still the life Owen had built and trusted Caleb to continue. Wyatt came out of the barn. Preston call. Yeah. How'd that go? About like you'd expect. What now? Caleb looked at the northern pastures, the section Owen had given him. 500 acres, not as much as the southern section, but better land, better water, better everything, enough to build a life on, enough to pass on someday. Now we figure out what we're going to build. Wyatt grinned. About damn time. They stood there as the sun finished setting, two men on land that had been worked for 100 years and would be worked for 100 more. The phone kept ringing in Caleb's pocket. Preston, probably, or Vanessa, or Travis. Let them call. Let them rage. Let them learn what their father had already known. Some things aren't for sale. Some things you can't buy or inherit or demand. Some things you have to earn. And Caleb had earned this. Every acre, every drop of water, every moment of the life he was going to build. He thought about Owen sitting on his porch, looking at this same view, making the decision to divide the ranch. Making the decision to trust the man who stayed over the children who left. It must have been hard, must have hurt, but Owen had done it anyway because it was right. Caleb would make sure it stayed right, would build something worthy of the gift, would take on young workers and teach them what Owen had taught him, would protect the water and the land and pass it on when his time came. That's how ranches lasted. That's how legacies worked. Not through blood but through dirt and sweat and the choice to stay when leaving was easier. The stars were coming out now. Caleb could see the Big Dipper, Orion's belt, all the constellations Owen had taught him to navigate by during night checks on the cattle. The old man was gone, but his teaching remained. His land remained. His trust remained. And Caleb would prove he deserved it, every single day for the rest of his life. He turned and walked toward his cabin, his home, on his land, ready to start building whatever came next. Preston's lawyers filed the motion 3 days after Caleb's phone call. Russell Kane hand delivered a copy to the ranch, his face grim but not surprised. They're claiming Owen had early onset dementia in 2002 when he established the trust. They've got a neurologist willing to testify that the medical records show cognitive decline. Caleb was mending fence in the east pasture when Russell found him. The morning was cold, frost still on the grass despite the sun climbing. His breath came out in clouds. What medical records? Owen's doctor visits from 2001 and 2002. Routine checkups, nothing unusual, but their expert claims the notes indicate possible early symptoms. That's bullshit. Owen was sharp as a tack until his first stroke in 2007. I know that, you know that, but they're going to make us prove it in court. Caleb drove the fence post deeper into the frozen ground, muscles burning with the effort. How long will this take? Could be months. They'll subpoena ranch records, financial documents, medical files. They'll depose you, depose me, depose anyone who knew Owen. They're trying to establish a pattern of undue influence. Undue influence, Caleb spat the words. I worked for the man for 20 years, never asked for anything, never pushed for anything, just did my job. That's what we'll argue, but Caleb, you need to understand what you're up against. Preston hired Whitmore and Associates out of Denver, corporate litigation specialists. They're expensive and they're good. This is going to get ugly. How ugly? Russell looked out at the land, at the cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. They'll dig into your past, the dishonorable discharge, the gambling debts, anything they can use to paint you as a manipulator who took advantage of a vulnerable old man. Let them dig, I've got nothing to hide. Everyone has something to hide, Caleb. That's what lawyers count on. After Russell left, Caleb worked through the afternoon until his hands were numb and his back screamed. Physical pain was cleaner than the other kind. You could work through it, push past it, come out the other side stronger. Legal warfare was different. It was designed to grind you down slowly, to make you question everything, to make surrender seem reasonable. That evening, the first news story hit. Local paper in Billings ran it under the headline "Ranch Foreman Accused of Elder Exploitation." The article was carefully worded, full of alleged and claimed, but the damage was done. Caleb's phone started ringing. Friends asking if it was true, neighbors wanting to know what was happening. Ben Sawyer drove over that night. "Don't read the comments online," Ben said. "People are idiots." "I'm not online." "Good, keep it that way." Ben sat on the porch of the foreman's cabin, a beer in his weathered hand. "You need anything, you call. Money for lawyers, a place to stay if this gets worse, whatever." "I appreciate that." Owen knew what he was doing. Anyone who worked with that man knows he was sharp until the end. Preston and his siblings are just pissed they didn't get everything. Caleb watched the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. They got 700 acres. That's not nothing. It's not what they expected. And people hate not getting what they expect, even when what they got is more than they deserve. The legal assault intensified over the next 2 weeks. Subpoenas arrived daily. Caleb spent hours with Russell going over ranch records, explaining decisions Owen had made, documenting the old man's competence. They pulled financial statements showing Owen's careful management. They gathered testimonies from the veterinarian who'd worked with Owen for 30 years, from feed suppliers, from neighboring ranchers. But Preston's lawyers were relentless. They found a doctor willing to reinterpret Owen's medical notes. They brought in handwriting experts to analyze Owen's signature on the trust documents, claiming possible forgery. They filed motions and counter-motions, burying Russell in paperwork that cost money Caleb didn't have. Russell worked pro bono, but there were still court fees, expert witness fees, costs that added up faster than Caleb could track. His $10,000 inheritance was disappearing into the legal system. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was spending Owen's final gift to defend Owen's real gift. The sabotage started in the 3rd week. Small things at first, a gate left open, cattle wandering onto the road. Caleb chalked it up to accident until it happened again. Then the tractor wouldn't start. Sugar in the gas tank. $1,500 to repair. Wyatt found the cut fence line on a Tuesday morning. Clean cuts, deliberate, running for 30 yards. 40 head of cattle had wandered through before they noticed. It took all day to round them up. "This wasn't an accident," Wyatt said, holding up the cut wire. "Someone did this on purpose." Caleb knew who. Travis. The youngest Hartley, the one who'd seemed almost apologetic at the will reading. But desperation changed people, and men who needed money did stupid things. The vandalism escalated. Equipment left running until it overheated. Feed contaminated with diesel fuel. Small fires started in the hay storage that Caleb caught before they spread. Nothing provable. Nothing he could take to the sheriff without sounding paranoid. But someone was trying to make the ranch unworkable. It was working. Between the legal bills and the sabotage, Caleb was hemorrhaging money. His savings were gone. He was dipping into the operating budget for the ranch, the money he needed to buy feed and maintain equipment. At this rate, he'd be broke before the case went to trial. On a Friday afternoon, 6 weeks after he'd found the deed, a man in an expensive suit showed up at the ranch. His truck was new, his boots had never seen real dirt, and his handshake was the kind that tried too hard. "Mr. Stone, my name is David Chen. I represent Silver Point Development Group." Caleb was replacing rotted boards in the barn. He set down his hammer but didn't shake the offered hand. "I'm busy." "I understand. I'll be brief. Silver Point is interested in acquiring water rights in this region. We understand you control the primary water source for what was formerly the Hartley Ranch." "That's right. We'd like to make you an offer, $2 million for permanent water rights. You'd retain ownership of your 500 acres, but we'd have unrestricted access to the spring." Caleb picked up his hammer, drove a nail into the board he was replacing. "Not interested." "Mr. Stone, $2 million is more than generous. That's $4,000 per acre for what is essentially worthless grazing land without the water. You could retire, travel, never work again." "I like working." Chen smiled the way people smile when they think you're stupid. "I understand this land has sentimental value, but sentiment doesn't pay legal bills, and from what I hear, you've got substantial legal bills mounting." Caleb stopped working, looked at the man. "Who told you about my legal situation?" "It's public record. Court filings are available to anyone. I'm simply pointing out that $2 million would solve a lot of problems. You could settle with the Hartley siblings, keep your 500 acres and still have over $1 million left. That's winning, Mr. Stone." "Winning would be keeping what's mine without selling it to people who'll ruin it." "We're not going to ruin anything. We're planning sustainable development. Luxury homes with minimal environmental impact. Your water source can support it easily." Caleb drove another nail. "Every developer says minimal impact. Then 5 years later the stream runs dry and the land's dead. I've seen it happen. This is different. We have environmental engineers, conservation plans, all the proper studies. This water source produces more than enough for both ranching and residential use." "No." Chen's smile thinned. "Mr. Stone, be reasonable. You're one man. What are you going to do with 500 acres? Run 50 head of cattle, make $20,000 a year if you're lucky. You're sitting on a fortune and refusing to cash it in out of stubbornness." "Out of principle, there's a difference. Principle doesn't feed cattle, money does." Caleb set down his hammer, faced Chen fully. "You don't understand how this works. Owen Hartley gave me this land because I loved it enough to work it for 20 years without knowing I'd ever own it. He trusted me to protect it, protect the water, keep it ranch land. I'm not selling to you or anyone else. Not for 2 million, not for 10 million. This land is worth more than money." Chen's expression hardened. "Everyone has a price, Mr. Stone. You'll find yours eventually." "Mine's not money. Sorry to disappoint you." Chen left without another word. His truck kicked up dust driving out, expensive and clean and everything Owen had hated about developers. Caleb watched him go and felt something twist in his gut. $2 million. He could pay off the legal bills, help Wyatt start his own operation, maybe even buy out Preston and Vanessa's sections, reunite the ranch. Be smart, be practical. But Owen's letter echoed in his head. Build something good, take on young workers, pass it on. That's how ranches last. Owen hadn't given him this land to sell it. He'd given it to protect it. And Caleb would honor that even if it meant going broke fighting for it. That night he couldn't sleep. Lay in bed running numbers that didn't work, legal fees climbing, sabotage costing thousands, winter coming with feed bills and equipment needs. 2 million would solve everything, would make it all easy. But easy wasn't the same as right. He got up before dawn, walked out into the cold darkness. The stars were brilliant overhead, the Milky Way a river of light across the black sky. Owen used to say you could tell a real rancher by whether they noticed the stars. Men who only cared about money kept their eyes on the ground, counting dollars. Men who loved the land looked up. Caleb looked up. Let the stars remind him what mattered. When the sun rose, he started the day's work. Fed the cattle, checked the fences Travis had cut and repaired, mended what needed mending. The work was its own answer. This was what he did. This was who he was. Developer money couldn't change that. A week later, Wyatt came running from the barn, phone in hand. "Boss, you need to hear this." Ben Sawyer was on the line. Caleb, Mountain Vista just withdrew their offer on the Hartley Southern section. What? The development company. They were supposed to close today on Preston's 700 acres. They pulled out. Something about the title search showing water rights complications. They're not buying land they can't develop. Caleb felt something settle in his chest, the pieces clicking together. They found out the southern section doesn't have water rights. Exactly. Without your water, that land can't support the kind of development they wanted. Preston's deal just collapsed. How much was he getting? They'd negotiated down to $7 million for all three siblings' portions. Now he's got nothing. And Caleb, there's more. Word is Preston borrowed against his expected inheritance. Took out loans to cover business debts. He was counting on that $7 million. How much did he borrow? $4 million. The number hung in the air. Preston had borrowed $4 million against land he thought he owned free and clear. Land that turned out to be worth maybe $2 million without water rights. He wasn't just losing money. He was ruined. When did this happen? Caleb asked. Mountain Vista pulled out this morning. Preston just found out an hour ago. He's trying to reach you. Sure enough, 3 missed calls from Preston's number. Caleb stared at his phone. Part of him wanted to answer, to hear the desperation in Preston's voice. But there was no satisfaction in watching a man drown, even if he jumped in the water himself. Thanks for letting me know, Ben. He hung up. Wyatt was waiting. What's going on? Preston's deal fell through. The developers won't buy land without water rights. Good serves him right. But it didn't feel good. It felt inevitable. Preston had made his choices, had valued money over land, immediate profit over long-term stewardship, had borrowed against expectations that were never guaranteed, and now he'd pay the price Owen had known he would pay. That afternoon, while Caleb was checking cattle in the north pasture, Preston's car pulled up to the ranch. Not a rental this time. An older sedan, modest, the kind a man drives when he can't afford better. Preston got out slow, like he'd aged a decade in 6 weeks. Caleb rode over on horseback, didn't dismount, made Preston look up at him. What do you want, Preston? The deal fell through. Mountain Vista won't buy without the water rights. I know. You know, Preston's voice cracked. You knew they'd pull out. I knew your land was worth less without water. Anyone who understands ranching knows that. Your father knew it. That's why he protected the water source. I'm ruined, Caleb. I borrowed $4 million against the sale. I have 90 days to pay it back or I lose everything. My house, my practice, everything. Why'd you borrow money you didn't have? Because I needed it. Business debts, overhead obligations. I was supposed to get my share of $8 million. $4 million seemed safe. Nothing's safe when you borrow against expectations. Preston's face twisted. This is your fault. If you just taken the developer's offer, if you just been reasonable, we could all walk away with money. Your father didn't give me this land to sell it. My father was a stubborn old fool who cared more about dirt than people. The words hung in the air. Preston seemed to realize what he'd said, how he sounded. He deflated. I'm going to lose everything, he said quietly. My partners are going to sue me. My creditors are circling. I'll be lucky if I can practice law in any state after this. All because my father decided to punish us for not being ranchers. He didn't punish you. He gave you what you could handle. 700 acres. You could have kept it, worked it, built something. Instead, you leveraged it for money you didn't earn, and now you're angry it didn't work out. What am I supposed to do now? Sell the 700 acres for what they're actually worth. Pay what you can. Rebuild from what's left. That's what men do when they make mistakes. They face the consequences and start over. Preston looked at him with something like hatred. Easy for you to say. You got the good land. I got the land I earned. You got the land you inherited. The difference is I stayed. You left. Your father understood that even if you don't. Preston got back in his car without another word, drove away trailing dust and the wreckage of his own greed. Caleb watched him go and felt no triumph, just sadness for a man who'd never understood what his father tried to teach him. Later that evening, Russell called with an update. Preston's financial situation is even worse than Ben told you. He didn't just borrow $4 million. He also took out a home equity loan and maxed out credit lines. Total debt is closer to $6 million. He was so sure of that development deal. What happens now? Best case, he sells the 700 acres for $2.2 million. That barely covers half his debts. He'll have to declare bankruptcy, lose his house, probably lose his law license over the way he structured those loans. His creditors will pursue him for years. And the lawsuit against me? Already falling apart. His lawyers are pulling back. When they found out Preston can't pay them, they lost interest fast. The neurologist withdrew his testimony. The handwriting analysis was debunked. Give it another week and they'll drop the whole thing. Caleb should have felt relief, should have celebrated, but all he felt was tired. Preston had destroyed himself and nearly destroyed Caleb in the process. The legal war was almost over, but the cost had been high on both sides. Thanks, Russell. Let me know when it's official. The next morning brought another visitor, Travis. He looked worse than Preston, unshaven, eyes red, hands shaking. Caleb found him sitting in his truck outside the foreman's cabin, couldn't seem to make himself get out. Caleb walked over. You okay, Travis? No, Travis's voice was barely audible. I'm not okay. What's going on? I did something stupid, really stupid. He looked up at Caleb. I need to tell you something. If I don't tell someone, I think I'm going to lose my mind. Tell me. Travis took a shaky breath. It was me, the sabotage. The cut fences, the tractor, all of it. I was desperate. My franchise failed. Wife left. I'm broke, Caleb, completely broke. Preston said if we could make you give up, sell the water rights, we'd all walk away with money. He said it was the only way to save ourselves. Caleb felt cold wash over him. You've been vandalizing my property for 6 weeks. I know it's wrong. I just kept thinking if I could make it hard enough, expensive enough, you'd take one of the developer offers. But it didn't work. You wouldn't break. And now Preston's deal fell through anyway, and I did it all for nothing. You could have killed someone, cut fences, cattle on the road. Someone could have hit them. I wasn't thinking. I was just desperate and scared, and Preston kept pushing, saying we had to do something. Preston told you to sabotage my ranch. Travis shook his head. Not directly. He just kept saying we needed to apply pressure, make you understand what you were costing us. I took it too far. Caleb stood there trying to process. Preston orchestrating sabotage from a distance. Travis executing it out of desperation. Both of them too blind to see they were destroying themselves. I'm going to the sheriff, Travis said. I'm going to confess. I can't live with this. I just wanted to tell you first. Apologize, not that it matters. It matters, not enough to fix what you did, but it matters. Travis drove away. Caleb called the sheriff, gave a statement. By evening, Travis was in custody. Attempted sabotage, criminal trespassing, destruction of property. The charges would stick. Travis would face consequences. But Caleb found no satisfaction in it, just exhaustion. The Hartley family was tearing itself apart over money and land and expectations that were never real. Owen had seen it coming, had tried to prevent it by dividing the ranch. But you can't save people from themselves. 3 days later, Caleb got a call from an unfamiliar number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Stone, this is Gerald Whitmore. I'm lead counsel for Preston Hartley." "I know who you are. I'm calling to inform you that we're dropping our case against the trust. Preston can no longer afford our services, and frankly, the case has no merit. You'll receive formal notification by mail, but I wanted to tell you personally. You won, Mr. Stone. Congratulations." The line went dead. Caleb stood there holding his phone. You won. But it didn't feel like winning. It felt like surviving while others destroyed themselves. That evening, Russell came by with the official papers. "It's done. Preston dropped the lawsuit. Travis is facing criminal charges. Vanessa wants nothing to do with either of them. She's planning to sell her portion of the 700 acres and move back east. It's over, Caleb." "What about Preston?" "Filed for bankruptcy this morning. Lost his house, his practice, everything. His creditors are coming after him for years. He'll be paying this off until he's 70. And Travis pled guilty. Got 3 years probation, restitution, mandatory counseling. He won't be able to come near this property for the rest of his life." Caleb looked out at the land. His land. 500 acres he'd fought for and won. But the victory tasted like ashes. Owen's family was destroyed. The ranch was divided. And Caleb was left standing alone on land that had cost everyone everything. "There's something else," Russell said. "I found this in Owen's papers. Another letter, addressed to you. Instructions were to give it to you only after the legal battle was over." He handed Caleb an envelope, Owen's handwriting. Caleb opened it with shaking hands. "Caleb, if you're reading this, you fought for the land and won. Preston probably tried to destroy you. Travis probably helped. Vanessa probably ran. I'm not surprised. I raised them wrong. Gave them too much, expected too little. They learned to value money because I made their lives too easy. That was my failure, not theirs. But you learned to value work because nothing came easy. You earned every acre. Don't feel guilty about Preston losing everything. He chose to borrow against expectations. That's gambling. You know better than anyone where gambling leads. You beat it. He didn't. Now for what's really important. I've given you land. I've given you water rights. But I haven't given you what you need to build. Go to the original homestead cabin on your 500 acres. You'll find it in the northwest corner about a mile past the spring. Under the floorboards there's something waiting. Something to help you start fresh. Build something good, Caleb. Build something that lasts. And forgive my children if you can. They're broken people who never learn to fix themselves. Owen." Caleb read the letter twice. The homestead cabin. Owen had mentioned it in his previous letter, but Caleb had been so focused on the legal battle he hadn't looked for it yet. "I need to go somewhere," he told Russell. "Now it's almost dark." "Now." He saddled a horse, rode out toward the northwest corner of his property. The spring was easy to find, water flowing clear and cold in the fading light. Past the spring he found an old trail through the pines, followed it until he saw the cabin. It was small, maybe 15 by 20 feet. Log construction, still solid despite being almost 150 years old. The roof sagged in places, but the walls were straight. The door hung on leather hinges, swollen shut with age and weather. Caleb pushed hard and it gave. Inside smelled like old wood and mice and time. One room, a stone fireplace, remnants of furniture too rotted to use, a loft where someone had once slept, and the floor wide planks of pine worn smooth by generations of boots. Caleb walked to the center of the room, felt the floor give slightly under his weight, knelt down. One board was different from the others, newer, didn't fit quite right. He pried at it with his knife. The board came up easy. Underneath was a metal box identical to the one he'd found in the barn. His hands shook as he pulled it out, Owen's voice in his head. Under the floorboards there's something waiting. He opened it. Inside was money, stacks of $100 bills wrapped in bank bands. Caleb counted, $50,000, and beneath the money another letter. Caleb, if you made it here, you turned down the developer. Good, I left you money so you don't have to. 50,000 isn't much, but it'll get you started. Restore this cabin. Buy a starter herd for your 500 acres. Build something. This cabin is where my great-grandfather built the Hartley name. He had nothing but grit. Built this with his hands. Raised my grandfather here. This is where it all began. Now it begins again with you. Restore this cabin. Live here. Build your own legacy from the same ground we built ours. You're not a Hartley by blood, but you're a Hartley by dirt and sweat and choice. That's better. My kids will hate you for a while. Let them. Eventually they'll understand or they won't. Either way you'll have the land. Final piece of advice. Find a young worker who reminds you of you. Teach them what I taught you. That's how this works. That's how it lasts. I'm proud of you, son. Wish I'd said it while I was alive. Owen. Caleb read the letter 3 times. His eyes were wet and he didn't try to stop it. Owen had thought of everything. Had known Caleb would be tempted by developer money. Had known he'd choose right. Had rewarded that choice with the means to build what came next. $50,000 wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to restore this cabin. Enough to start a herd. Enough to prove that Owen's faith was justified. He sat on the floor of that old cabin, surrounded by history and possibility, and let himself cry. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. Owen had given him more than land. He'd given him validation. Proof that loyalty mattered, that hard work counted, that the right person sees and values you even when they don't say it. When the tears stopped, Caleb stood up, looked around the cabin with new eyes. This would be his home. Not the foreman's cabin he'd lived in for 20 years, but this place. The beginning place, where Owen's story had started and where Caleb's story would continue. He walked outside into the afternoon light. The spring was 30 yards away, water flowing clear and cold. His water, his land, his responsibility. In the distance he could see Wyatt working the south pasture. The kid had stayed through everything. Through the legal threats and the sabotage and the uncertainty. Maybe Wyatt was the one Owen had meant. Find a young worker who reminds you of you. Caleb pulled out his phone, called Russell Kane. Russell, what's the status on Preston's case? Falling apart. His lawyers are negotiating a settlement. They know they can't win. What are they offering? They'll drop the lawsuit if you agree not to sue for the sabotage and arson attempt. Clean break. You keep your 500 acres, they keep their 700, everybody moves on. That acceptable to you? It's more than acceptable, it's victory. You won, Caleb. The land is yours free and clear. Caleb looked at the cabin, at the spring, at the mountains beyond. Tell them I accept, on one condition. I want the original homestead cabin restored and registered as historic property, protected in perpetuity. Can you make that happen? I can make that happen. Good, do it. I'm done fighting, time to start building. He hung up, stood there in the place where it had all begun, where it would all continue. Owen had trusted him with this, had believed he'd choose land over money, legacy over profit, hard work over easy answers. Caleb wouldn't let him down. He'd restore this cabin. He'd build a herd. He'd teach Wyatt everything Owen had taught him. And someday, when his own time came, he'd pass it on to someone else who loved the land enough to stay when staying was hard. That was the promise. That was the obligation. That was what turning $50,000 in a box under a floorboard into something that lasted 100 years looked like. He walked back toward the main ranch, toward Wyatt and the work that waited. The legal war was over. The real work was just beginning. And Caleb Stone, foreman turned landowner, was ready to prove he deserved every acre Owen Hartley had given him. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting everything gold. Cattle moved across pastures that would stay pastures. Water flowed from a spring that would stay protected. And in the original homestead cabin, dust motes danced in the last light of day, waiting for someone to bring it back to life. Time to build. The settlement papers arrived on a Tuesday morning in late spring. Russell Kane brought them personally, sat at Caleb's table in the foreman's cabin while rain drummed on the roof. "It's done," Russell said. "Preston and Vanessa agree to drop all claims to your 500 acres. You agree not to pursue damages for the sabotage or Travis's arson attempt. Clean break." Caleb read through the legal language, all the whereas and hereby clauses that translated to "you won and they lost." What about Travis? Pled guilty to attempted arson. Got 3 years probation, mandatory counseling, restitution for damages. He won't be bothering you again. And Preston? Russell's expression darkened. Preston's in worse shape than Travis. The loans he took against the expected inheritance are due. His creditors are circling. He'll have to sell his portion of the ranch just to stay out of bankruptcy court. How much will he get? Ben Sawyer's offering $1.8 million for Preston and Vanessa's combined 700 acres. That's the best offer they'll see. Split 2 ways, that's $900,000 each. After Preston's debts, he'll walk away with maybe $200,000. $200,000. Once it would have seemed like a fortune to Caleb. Now it just seemed sad. Preston had gambled on greed and lost everything. Not because Caleb had beaten him, but because he'd beaten himself. And Vanessa? She's taking her $900,000 and moving back east. Wants distance from all of this. She asked me to give you something. Russell pulled an envelope from his briefcase. Caleb's name on the front in feminine handwriting. He opened it. "Caleb, I'm sorry for how we treated you, for how we treated Dad, for not seeing what he saw in you until it was too late. You deserved that land, you earned it. I hope you build something good there. I hope you make Dad proud. I think you already have. Vanessa." Caleb folded the letter, put it in his pocket. It didn't change anything, but it meant something. Acknowledgement, understanding. Better late than never. After Russell left, Caleb walked out into the rain. The settlement was done. The land was his. 500 acres free and clear, no more legal threats, no more family claiming what wasn't theirs. He should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt the weight of what came next. Owning land was one thing. Making it productive was another. He had $50,000 from Owen's hidden box. He had 500 acres of good grazing land. He had a homestead cabin that needed complete restoration. And he had Wyatt, 24 years old and willing but still learning. It wasn't much to build a ranch on, but it was more than Owen's great-grandfather had started with in 1880. That afternoon he and Wyatt drove to the homestead cabin. The rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and bright. The cabin sat in a clearing surrounded by pines, the spring visible through the trees, water running clear over smooth stones. "This is where we start," Caleb said. Wyatt walked around the cabin, testing the walls, checking the foundation. Roof needs replacing, probably all the windows. Floors solid though. Logs are good. How long to make it livable? Doing it ourselves. 3 months if we work steady. Could hire help and cut that in half. We'll do it ourselves. Owen built his legacy with his own hands. We'll do the same. They spent the next week planning. Drew up materials lists, priced lumber and roofing, figured out what they could salvage and what they had to buy new. Caleb allocated $30,000 of Owen's money for the cabin restoration. That left $20,000 for livestock and equipment. Tight, but doable. Ben Sawyer came by the second week with an offer Caleb hadn't expected. I'm buying Preston and Vanessa's 700 acres, closing in 30 days. But I'm 68 years old, Caleb. I don't need more land to manage. I'm proposing a partnership. They sat on the porch of the foreman's cabin, coffee going cold in their cups. Ben laid it out simple and direct. You run cattle on my new 700 acres plus your 500, 1,200 acres total, back to what Owen had. We split the profits 60-40, you getting the bigger share since you're doing the work. I provide the startup capital for your herd. You provide the labor and expertise. Caleb didn't answer right away, thought about it, turned it over, looked for the catch. Why would you do that? Because Owen was my friend for 40 years. Because you're good at this work. Because I want to see this ranch stay a ranch, not turn into condos. And because I'm too old to run it myself but too stubborn to see it go to waste. What happens when you die? Ben smiled. My kids have their own lives, don't want a ranch. My will leaves my portion to you with the same terms Owen gave you. You take care of it, you pass it on, you keep it working land. It was more than a business deal. It was Ben honoring Owen's vision. 1,200 acres. The whole original ranch, minus the main house and barn which would stay with Ben's property. But the land, the pastures, the grazing, all of it working together like Owen had intended. I accept. They shook hands, started planning that afternoon. Ben had connections with cattle auctions, knew which breeding stock was worth buying, which bulls threw good calves. He fronted $40,000 for a starter herd. 60 head of black Angus cows, 3 bulls, all registered with good bloodlines. You build this right, in 5 years you'll have 200 head, Ben said. In 10 years you'll be one of the best operations in the valley. The cattle arrived in June. Caleb and Wyatt spent 3 days getting them settled, learning their personalities, watching how they moved across the pastures. Cattle were like people. Some were leaders, some were followers, some were troublemakers. Knowing the difference made all the difference. The cabin restoration became their evening work. They'd run the ranch during the day, work on the cabin until dark, fall into bed exhausted. Wyatt proved to be better at finish carpentry than Caleb. His hands were steadier, his eye for detail sharper. He rebuilt the window frames perfect and square, fitted the door so it hung true, sanded the floor planks until they were smooth as glass. Where'd you learn this? Caleb asked, watching Wyatt mortise a hinge. Foster home when I was 16. Old man who took me in was a carpenter. Only person who ever taught me anything useful. You ever thank him? Didn't get the chance. He died when I was 17, heart attack. I went to 6 more homes in 2 years after that, none of them good. Caleb understood. Some people got lucky with the families they were born into. Others had to build their own families from people who chose to care. Owen had chosen Caleb. Caleb was choosing Wyatt. That's how it worked when blood didn't do the job. By August the cabin was livable. New roof, new windows, the fireplace cleaned and working. They'd kept everything original they could. The wide plank floors, the exposed log walls. The loft where Owen's grandfather had slept as a boy. It felt like history, like continuity, like the beginning of something that would outlast them both. Caleb moved in on a Saturday, carried his few possessions from the foreman's cabin to the homestead. Clothes, books, the journal Owen had kept about him, the letters Owen had written. Not much to show for 49 years of life, but the cabin was what mattered. The land was what mattered. He'd lived in the foreman's cabin for 20 years as an employee. Now he lived in the homestead as an owner. The difference was everything. That first night alone in the cabin, he built a fire in the stone fireplace. Sat in a chair Wyatt had built from pine they'd milled themselves. Listened to the wood pop and the wind move through the pines outside. Thought about Owen's great-grandfather sitting in this same spot 150 years ago, building his own dream from nothing but land and will. The ghosts were good company. They reminded him what was possible. The ranch work settled into rhythms. Summer meant moving cattle to high pastures, maintaining fences, checking water sources. Fall meant bringing the herd down, weaning calves, preparing for winter. Caleb ran it the way Owen had taught him, sustainable, conservative, thinking in decades instead of quarters. The first calf crop came in spring. 42 calves from 60 cows. Good percentage. Caleb stayed up 3 nights straight during the birthing, helping the difficult ones, monitoring the easy ones, making sure every calf got its first milk. Lost one to a difficult birth. Saved 41. He thought about Owen's journal entry from his first year. Lost 2, saved 47. He cried over the 2. I didn't tell him that's what makes a good rancher, caring about the ones you lose. Caleb had cried over that one calf, had done everything right and still lost it. That's ranching. That's life. You do your best and sometimes it's not enough and you carry that weight and you keep going. By the second summer, the operation was making money. Not much, but enough to pay expenses and reinvest in the herd. Caleb hired a young hand named Marcus, 29, Iraq veteran, PTSD and no place to go. Same story as Caleb's 20 years earlier. He put Marcus in the foreman's cabin, taught him the same way Owen had taught him. Hard work, high expectations, few words. Marcus struggled at first. Angry, defensive, sure the world owed him something. Caleb let him struggle, let him be angry, gave him work that was too hard and watched him figure out how to do it anyway. 3 months in, Marcus started to change. 6 months in, he was reliable. A year in, Caleb trusted him to run things when Caleb had to be gone. Why are you doing this? Marcus asked one evening. They were mending fence in the north pasture, the sun setting orange behind the mountains. Doing what? Giving me a chance. You don't know me, don't owe me anything. Someone gave me a chance once. I'm passing it on. That simple. That simple. Wyatt had moved into a small house on the property, started talking about finding a wife, settling down. At 26, he was ready for that kind of life. He'd grown from an angry kid to a solid man, confident in his work, proud of what they'd built together. You ever think about getting married? Wyatt asked Caleb one day. Not really. Why not? You're only 50. You've got land, a good operation going, women like that. Caleb smiled. I'm married to the land, Wyatt, that's enough. But it wasn't entirely true. There was Nora from the feed store. She'd been stopping by more often, bringing casseroles, staying for coffee, finding reasons to check on him. She was 57, widowed 10 years, had known Owen and respected what Caleb was building. They started having dinner together once a week. Nothing formal, just company. She'd cook at her place or he'd cook at the cabin. They'd talk about ranching, about the valley, about the people they'd both known. It was easy, comfortable. Neither of them was in a hurry for more, but neither of them was opposed to the possibility. Owen would have approved, she said one evening. They were sitting on the cabin porch watching the stars come out. "You think he always wanted you to have a life outside the ranch. He felt guilty that you didn't. He shouldn't have. The ranch was enough." "Was it, or is it just all you knew?" Caleb thought about that. Maybe she was right. Maybe he'd hidden in work because it was safer than risking connection. But Nora wasn't a risk. She was easy. She understood this life. She didn't want to change him. "I'm not good at this," he said finally. "At what? Sitting on a porch? You're doing fine." "At being with someone." She took his hand. Hers was warm, calloused from her own work. "Good thing I'm patient." They sat there holding hands while the stars wheeled overhead. It wasn't romance like in movies. It was better. It was real. The third year brought challenges. Drought hit the valley hard. Streams ran low. Pastures turned brown. Caleb had to buy supplemental feed, cut into profits, watch the herd lose weight. But the spring on his property kept flowing. The water Owen had protected, that Caleb now controlled, sustained them when other ranches struggled. Ben Sawyer came by in August, his face grim. "I'm hurting, Caleb. The drought's killing me. I might have to sell some breeding stock just to buy feed." "Use my water." "What?" "My spring's still flowing strong. Run a line to your southern pasture, take what you need. No charge." "Caleb, that water's worth a fortune, especially in a drought." "Then consider it an investment in our partnership. You go under, I lose my grazing land. We both need each other to survive." Ben argued, but Caleb was firm. They ran the water line that week. Ben's cattle had access to the spring. His pastures stayed green enough to support the herd. When the drought finally broke in October, Ben tried to pay Caleb for the water. Caleb refused. "Owen protected that water for the valley. I'm doing the same." That winter Ben threw a community gathering at his place. 30 ranchers from across the valley, all of them struggling, all of them helped by Caleb's willingness to share water rights. They presented him with a plaque. "For stewardship and community. The Owen Hartley spirit lives on." Caleb hung the plaque in the homestead cabin, looked at it sometimes when he doubted whether he was doing this right. Owen had known, had understood that protecting the water wasn't about hoarding wealth. It was about sustaining a community, about making sure the valley stayed ranch country instead of becoming subdivisions. The fourth year Preston called, first time they'd spoken since the settlement. "Caleb, it's Preston." Silence. "Then, what do you want?" "I wanted you to know I'm teaching business law at community college in Denver. It's not much, but it's honest work." "Good for you." "I talk to my students about ethics, about what matters. I use the ranch as a case study. What happens when you value the wrong things?" "You're using your own failure as a teaching tool." "Yes, because maybe if I'd learned that lesson earlier, I wouldn't have lost everything." Caleb didn't know what to say. Preston sounded different, humbled, broken but starting to rebuild. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Preston continued. "I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know I understand now. What Dad saw in you, why he gave you the land, you loved it. We just wanted to profit from it." "Your dad loved you, Preston. He just couldn't give you something you wouldn't value." "I know that now. Too late, but I know it." They talked for 20 minutes, not about the past but about the future. Preston was building a small life, teaching, paying his debts, trying to be worth something. Caleb didn't offer forgiveness because forgiveness implied Preston had wronged him personally, but he offered something better, acknowledgement that people could change. When they hung up, Caleb felt something shift. The anger he'd carried, the resentment at being undervalued for 20 years, it loosened. Preston had paid the price for his greed. Travis had paid for his violence. The ranch had stayed ranch land. Justice had been served the way Owen intended. The fifth year Vanessa came back, drove up to the homestead cabin on a Saturday in June, her teenage daughter in the passenger seat. Caleb was working on a tractor engine, hands black with grease. "Hello, Caleb." He looked up. Vanessa looked older, softer, less polished than he remembered. The expensive clothes were gone. She wore jeans and a simple shirt. "Vanessa, this is my daughter Emily. She's 16. She wanted to see where her grandfather lived." Emily climbed out of the car shy and curious. She had Owen's eyes, the same gray that could see through bullshit and into truth. "Can I look around?" Emily asked. "Sure, Wyatt's in the barn if you want to see the cattle." Emily walked off. Vanessa stayed, looking at the cabin, at the land stretching out beyond. "You restored it." "Owen wanted me to. It's where his great-grandfather started. Seemed right to bring it back." "It's beautiful." They stood in awkward silence. Then Vanessa said, "I'm sorry, Caleb, for everything, for how we treated you, for how we treated Dad, for not seeing what was right in front of us. You said that in your letter. I needed to say it in person, and I needed Emily to see this place, to understand what matters. Her grandfather knew. You know, I'm hoping she'll learn before she makes my mistakes." They walked to the spring. Vanessa knelt, cupped her hands, drank the cold water. "I remember this. Dad brought us here when we were kids, before Mom died. He said this water had fed the land for thousands of years, said our job was to make sure it fed it for thousands more. He never forgot that. We did. We forgot everything that mattered." Emily came back from the barn, excited. "Wyatt let me help feed the calves. Can I come back and do it again?" Vanessa looked at Caleb. He nodded. "Any time. We can always use help." Over the next year, Emily came back 6 times. She learned to mend fence, to birth calves, to read the weather and the land. Vanessa watched her daughter grow confident and capable, learning lessons Vanessa had rejected at the same age. "Thank you," Vanessa said during their last visit. "You're teaching her what Dad tried to teach us." "I'm teaching her what Owen taught me. The chain keeps going." After they left, Caleb sat on the cabin porch thinking about legacy. Owen's great-grandfather had started this ranch with nothing, had built it into something that fed a family for generations. Owen had nearly lost it to his children's greed but had protected it at the last moment. Now Caleb was building it again, teaching young people who needed what he'd needed. Marcus, Emily, Wyatt, all of them learning that work mattered, that land was trust not property, that legacy was built in dirt and sweat. That evening Nora came over. They cooked dinner together in the cabin kitchen, ate by the fire, talked about the day. She'd been part of his life for 3 years now, not married, not living together, but partners in the way that mattered. She understood when he needed space. He understood when she needed company. It worked. "I'm thinking about asking you to marry me," he said suddenly. She looked up from her plate, smiled. "You thinking about it or actually doing it?" "Thinking. I'm not good at these things." "How about this? When you're ready, you ask. If I'm ready, I'll say yes. Until then, we keep doing what we're doing." "That simple." "That simple." Caleb smiled. Everything in his life had gotten simpler since Owen died. The work was hard but straightforward. The relationships were honest. The land was his. No more wondering where he fit. No more questioning his worth. He knew who he was and what he was building. The 6th spring brought news. Ben Sawyer's health was failing. Cancer, the kind that didn't respond to treatment. He had maybe a year. "Don't look sad," Ben said when he told Caleb. "I'm 74. I've lived a good life. Ranch good land, made good friends. A man can't ask for more. What about your ranch? Told you years ago, it's yours when I'm gone. My lawyer has the papers. You'll own the whole 1,200 acres. What Owen built, what you're rebuilding, it'll all be one operation again. Caleb's throat tightened. Ben, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep building, keep teaching. Keep this Valley Ranch country. That's all the thanks I need. Ben died that December. The funeral was packed. Half the valley showed up to pay respects. At the reception afterward, ranchers Caleb barely knew came up to shake his hand. Ben talked about you all the time, one old-timer said. Said you were the future of ranching in this valley. Said you understood what mattered. The will was read a week later. Ben had left his entire operation to Caleb. 700 acres of prime grazing land, equipment, livestock, and a letter. Caleb, you reminded me why I got into this business. Not for money, but for the work, for the land, for building something that lasts. Owen saw it in you. I saw it in you. Now make sure the next generation sees it too. Keep teaching, keep building, keep this place alive. Your friend Ben. Caleb stood on the porch of the homestead cabin that night, looking out at 1,200 acres that were his to manage. Cattle moving slow across pastures, water flowing from the protected spring. Land that had been worked for 150 years and would be worked for 150 more. He thought about Owen's great-grandfather building this cabin with his bare hands, about Owen protecting the water when everyone told him to sell, about Ben trusting a broken veteran with nothing to his name, about all the people who'd believed in legacy over profit. Now it was his turn, his responsibility, his chance to prove they were right. Marcus came out of the barn, saw Caleb on the porch. Boss, you okay? Yeah, just thinking. About Ben. About all of it, about how we got here. Marcus climbed up, sat on the porch rail. Wyatt told me about Owen, about how he took you in with nothing, about how he gave you all this. He gave me a chance, that's what he gave me. That's what you gave me, what you're giving Emily, what Wyatt's going to give someone else someday. It keeps going. That's the idea. They sat in silence watching the stars. Somewhere a coyote called. Cattle lowed in response. The sounds of a working ranch. The sounds of a life that mattered. Caleb was 54 years old. He owned 1,200 acres of Montana ranch land. He had people who depended on him and people he depended on. He had work that would outlast him and a legacy he was still building. 27 years ago, he'd stumbled onto this ranch broken and desperate. Now he was whole, not because of money or property, but because of what Owen had taught him. That work gives dignity. That land demands respect. That legacy is built one day at a time through choices that matter. The next morning, he'd wake at dawn. He'd feed cattle and mend fence and do all the things that needed doing. But tonight, he just sat on the porch of a cabin that had sheltered 5 generations of ranchers and would shelter 5 more if he did his job right. The land stretched out dark and quiet under the stars. His land, his responsibility, his chance to prove that Owen Hartley's faith in a broken veteran had been the best decision the old man ever made. Time to build what came next. 2 years after Ben Sawyer's death, Caleb woke before dawn in the homestead cabin like he had every morning for the past 8 years. 56 years old now, gray starting at his temples, hands scarred from decades of work. Through the window he could see frost on the grass, the first hard freeze of autumn coming early this year. He built a fire in the stone fireplace, made coffee in the old percolator Owen's great-grandfather had probably used. While the coffee brewed, he stood at the window watching the land wake up. 1,200 acres of working ranch. 180 head of cattle now, the herd grown from Ben's original investment. 3 hired hands including Marcus and Wyatt. A sustainable operation that turned consistent profit and would for generations if he kept doing it right. The numbers were good, but they weren't the point. The point was the work itself, the continuity, the knowledge that this land had been ranched for 150 years and would be ranched for 150 more because people chose to value it over selling it. Wyatt's truck pulled up at 5:30. He lived in a small house on the property now with his wife Sarah, a school teacher from town. They had a baby on the way. Wyatt was 29, solid and dependable, running most of the day-to-day operations while Caleb focused on long-term planning and teaching. Morning, boss. Morning, how Sarah? Tired, baby's keeping her up nights and it's not even born yet. They worked through the early hours feeding cattle, checking water lines, doing all the tasks that never stopped needing to be done. Marcus joined them at 6, quiet as always but reliable. He'd been here 6 years now, long enough to know the ranch as well as anyone, long enough to stop flinching at loud noises and trust that the world wouldn't betray him. At breakfast, Wyatt brought up the proposal Caleb had been avoiding thinking about. That developer called again, Silver Point. They're up to $3 million now for the water rights. Same answer as last time. That's what I told them. But Caleb, $3 million, that's serious money. Money runs out, land lasts. I know, I'm just saying you could retire, travel, live easy. Caleb looked at him across the table. You want me to retire? Hell no, this place needs you. I'm just making sure you're choosing this for the right reasons. What are the right reasons? That you love it, that you want to be here, not that you feel obligated because Owen left it to you. It was a fair question. Caleb thought about it while he drank his coffee. Did he love this work or was he just doing it because Owen expected him to? The answer came quick and certain. He loved it. Loved the rhythm of the seasons, the challenge of the work, the satisfaction of building something that would outlast him. If Owen had never left him the land, he'd still be doing this. The ownership just meant he got to protect it. I love it, he said finally. I'll die doing this work. That's not obligation, that's choice. Wyatt nodded, satisfied. They went back to work. That afternoon, Emily arrived. She was 18 now, graduated from high school, taking a gap year before college to work ranches and figure out what she wanted. She'd been coming regularly for 3 years, had learned enough to be genuinely useful. Vanessa dropped her off, stayed for coffee. Thank you for this, Vanessa said. She's learned more here than she ever learned in school. She's a good worker, smart, pays attention. She wants to study agricultural business. Maybe come back and ranch someday. I never thought I'd have a daughter who wanted this life. Owen would be proud. Vanessa looked out at the land, at the cattle grazing, at Emily already heading to the barn to help Marcus with afternoon feeding. I think about Dad a lot, about how wrong we got it, how we almost destroyed what he built. You didn't destroy it, it's still here. Because of you, you saved it. Owen saved it. I'm just continuing what he started. They sat in silence for a while. Then Vanessa said, Preston's doing better, still teaching. Started a small consulting business helping family farms avoid the mistakes he made. He'll never have what he had before, but he's building something honest. That's good. He wants to visit sometime, see what you've done with the place. I told him I'd ask you first. Caleb thought about Preston, the man who'd tried to evict him, who'd sued him, who'd nearly destroyed himself with greed. 7 years had passed. People could change in 7 years, or they could just get better at hiding who they'd always been. Tell him he can come, but he needs to understand this isn't his father's ranch anymore. It's mine. If he can accept that, he's welcome. I'll tell him. After Vanessa left, Caleb worked through the afternoon with Emily. She had Owen's eye for cattle, could spot a sick cow from across the pasture, knew which calves would make good breeding stock and which were better sold as beef. She asked good questions, listened to the answers, didn't pretend to know things she didn't. "Why didn't you ever have kids?" she asked while they were mending fence in the north pasture. "Never found the right person at the right time." "What about Nora? You've been together 5 years." "We're together. That doesn't mean we need to get married or have kids. We're happy the way things are." "You ever regret it, not having a family?" Caleb looked at her, at Wyatt in the distance working with Marcus, at the land stretching out in every direction. "I've got family. It just looks different than what most people have." Emily nodded, understanding in a way only someone who'd been let down by blood family could understand. "Grandpa Owen felt that way about you, didn't he?" "I think so. Mom says he loved us, but he loved you more." "That's not true. He loved you the same. He just respected me more because I stayed. Love and respect are different things." "I'm going to stay too. Maybe not here, maybe not ranching exactly, but I'm not going to run from hard things. I'm not going to choose easy money over building something real. That's what this place taught me." Then Owen's legacy is working exactly like he intended. That evening Nora came over. They cooked dinner together, an easy routine they'd developed over the years. She'd basically moved in without officially moving in, kept her house in town but spent most nights at the cabin. It worked for them. No pressure, no expectations, just companionship and the comfortable silence of people who knew each other well. "I heard Silver Point offered $3 million," she said over dinner. News travels fast. "Are you tempted?" "No. Not even a little." Caleb thought about it honestly, maybe for a second. "Then I remember why Owen gave me this land. Not to sell it, but to protect it. The second I forget that is the second I lose what matters." Nora reached across the table, took his hand. "I'm glad you're stubborn." "You say that now. Wait until I'm 80 and still refusing to retire." "I'll still be glad." They cleaned up dinner, sat on the porch watching the sunset. The ritual had become Caleb's favorite part of the day. The work was done. The land was quiet. He could just sit and be grateful for what he had. "I've been thinking about something," Nora said. "What's that?" "Getting married. Not a big thing, just us and a few friends, make it official." Caleb looked at her. She was 62 now, gray hair and laugh lines and hands that had worked as hard as his. She'd been patient with him for 5 years, never pushed, never demanded, just been there steady and real. "I'd like that." "Yeah. Yeah, you want to do it soon or wait?" "How about spring? Give us time to plan, nothing fancy, just real." "Real is good." They sat holding hands while the stars came out. Caleb thought about how Owen would react to this news. The old man would probably just nod, wouldn't say much, but there'd be approval in that nod. Acknowledgement that Caleb was building a full life, not just a working one. The next week Preston called to arrange his visit. They settled on a Saturday in October. Caleb didn't tell anyone he was coming, didn't make a big deal of it. Just another day on the ranch that happened to include a ghost from the past. Preston arrived at noon in a modest sedan, no rental car, no expensive clothes. He'd aged hard in 7 years. Hair mostly gray, face lined with stress and regret. But there was something different in his eyes. Less arrogance, more awareness. "Thank you for seeing me," Preston said. "Come on, I'll show you around." They walked the property. Caleb showed him the restored homestead cabin, the expanded herd, the improvements he'd made to water systems and fencing. Preston listened without interrupting, asked technical questions that showed he'd been learning about ranching even though he'd never do it himself. At the spring, Preston knelt down, cupped his hands, drank. I used to hate coming here as a kid, thought it was boring, couldn't wait to leave. What changed? I did after I lost everything. After I had to rebuild from nothing, I understood what Dad was trying to teach us. That easy money corrupts. That hard work builds character. That land is responsibility, not just asset. You couldn't learn that while he was alive. I was too arrogant, too sure I knew better. I had to fail completely before I could see clearly. They sat on the bank of the spring. Preston pulled an envelope from his pocket. I wrote Dad a letter. Years too late, but I needed to say it. I brought it here thinking maybe I could read it to you. You're the closest thing to him that's left. Go ahead. Preston unfolded the letter, hands shaking slightly. Dad, I'm sorry for how I treated you, for how I treated the ranch, for how I treated Caleb. You saw something I couldn't see. That wealth isn't money, it's purpose. That legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you build while you're here. You gave me 700 acres and I threw it away because I wanted 8 million instead. You gave Caleb 500 acres and he turned it into something that will last centuries. You were right about everything. I was wrong about everything. I'm teaching business ethics now, using my failure as the primary case study, showing students what happens when you value wrong things. Some of them listen, some don't, just like I didn't listen to you. But I'm trying, Dad. I'm trying to build something honest even if it's small. I'm trying to be worth something. I hope wherever you are you can forgive me. And I hope Caleb knows he was the son you deserved. I never was. Preston. Preston folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope. His eyes were wet. Caleb's throat felt tight. Your father loved you, Preston. He just couldn't give you something you wouldn't value. That wasn't rejection. That was protection. I know that now. 7 years too late, but I know it. It's never too late to understand. Understanding is the first step to changing. They walked back to the cabin. Preston's car sat waiting. He got in, rolled down the window. Thank you for letting me come, for not holding on to anger. Anger doesn't grow anything worth keeping. I let it go a long time ago. Preston drove away. Caleb watched until the dust settled and the valley was quiet again. He felt something release, the last weight of the past dropping away. Preston wasn't his problem anymore, wasn't his enemy, was just a man who'd learned hard lessons and was trying to do better. That was enough. That winter Caleb started writing things down. Not a journal exactly, but instructions. How to manage the water rights, which pastures needed resting when, which cattle bloodlines to maintain, the accumulated wisdom of 30 years ranching, 20 of them learning from Owen, 10 building his own operation. He wasn't planning to die anytime soon, but men didn't get to choose their timing. Ben had taught him that. Better to leave instructions while your mind was clear than leave people guessing what you would have wanted. Wyatt found him writing one evening. What's that? Notes for whoever comes after me. After you planning on going somewhere. Not planning on it, but it happens whether you plan for it or not. Owen left me letters, saved my life. Figure I should do the same for whoever's next. Who is next? Caleb looked at him. Wyatt was 29, married, about to be a father, ran the ranch as well as Caleb did. The answer was obvious. You are if you want it. Wyatt sat down hard. You're giving me the ranch. Not giving, trusting. Same way Owen trusted me. You work it, you protect it. You pass it on when your time comes. That's the deal. Caleb, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, just keep doing what you're doing. When I'm gone, this land is yours. The papers are already drawn up. Russell Kane has them. What about Marcus? What about Emily? Marcus gets the foreman's cabin and a share of profits as long as he works here. Emily gets first right of refusal if she wants to buy in as a partner when she's ready. But the land goes to you. You earned it. Wyatt's eyes were wet. I came here angry and broken. You gave me a chance when nobody else would. Someone gave me a chance once. I'm passing it on. You'll do the same when your time comes. They sat in silence. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, the sounds of a life that mattered. Spring came. Caleb and Nora got married in the meadow by the spring. 20 people attended. Wyatt stood up for Caleb. Nora's daughter came from California. Emily was there. Marcus. A handful of neighboring ranchers, including some who'd known Owen. The ceremony was 5 minutes. The celebration lasted until dark. They didn't go on a honeymoon. Just moved Nora's things into the cabin officially, combined their lives in the practical way people who have already been living together do. The marriage didn't change much except to make permanent what they'd both already chosen. Owen would have liked this, Nora said one morning. You think? He told me once, years before he died, that he wished you'd find someone. Said you deserved more than just work. When did he tell you that? After his first stroke, when he thought he was dying. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd look after you. Make sure you didn't disappear into the ranch and forget to live. Caleb smiled. He was still managing my life from beyond the grave. He loved you. That's what love does. The herd grew to 200 head. The operation was more profitable than it had ever been under Owen. Not because Caleb was a better rancher, but because he'd had good teachers and made good choices and worked for 3 decades to understand this land. The money went back into the ranch. Better equipment, improved genetics in the cattle, solar panels on the barn, small improvements that would compound over generations. Emily finished college with a degree in agricultural business, came back to the valley and started working with 3 small ranches, helping them modernize while staying sustainable. She stopped by Caleb's place often, still learning, still asking questions, still being the granddaughter Owen never got to see but would have been proud of. I want to buy in as a partner, she said one afternoon. Not now, but eventually, when I have the capital. I want to be part of what you and Wyatt are building. We'd be lucky to have you. Really? Really? You've got Owen's eye for cattle and Ben's head for business. That's a combination worth having. She hugged him. Thank you for not giving up on our family, for showing me there was another way. I didn't show you anything. You learned it yourself. I just gave you a place to learn. Marcus got married that summer to a woman he'd met at the VA. They moved into a small house on the property, started talking about kids. He'd been with the ranch 6 years, was 35, finally believed he deserved good things. Watching him heal reminded Caleb of his own journey, how long it took, how much patience it required. One evening Marcus came to the cabin. I need to tell you something. What's that? I'm thinking about starting my own place. Small operation, maybe 50 acres. There's a property for sale up valley. Caleb felt pride and loss in equal measure. You should do it. You're not mad. Why would I be mad? You learned what you needed to learn here. Now you're ready to build your own thing. That's exactly what's supposed to happen. I want to do it the way you taught me. Sustainable, long-term thinking, building something that lasts. Then you'll do fine. Marcus left 6 months later, bought 40 acres up valley, started with 20 head of cattle, worked harder than Caleb had ever seen anyone work. Caleb helped when he could, giving advice, lending equipment, being to Marcus what Owen had been to him, the chain continuing. The ranch settled into new rhythms, Wyatt running operations, a new young hand named David learning the work, Emily consulting and helping with breeding decisions, Nora managing the books and keeping Caleb from working himself to death. On a Saturday morning in late summer, 7 years after Ben's death and 10 years after Owen's, Caleb walked up to the homestead cabin alone. He'd been thinking about Owen a lot lately, missing the old man, wishing he could show him what the ranch had become. He opened the wooden box where he kept Owen's letters, read through them again, the first one directing him to the barn, the second explaining the trust, the third from the cabin, the one that ended with "I'm proud of you, son. Wish I'd said it while I was alive." Caleb pulled out a sheet of paper, started writing his own letter, for Wyatt, for whoever came after. "Wyatt, if you're reading this, I'm gone. That's okay. Everything ends. What matters is what you do with the time you have. You came to this ranch angry and lost. You're leaving it a man who knows who he is and what he's building. That transformation happened because you chose it, because you showed up every day and did the work even when it was hard. Owen taught me that work is dignity. That land is trust. That legacy is built in dirt and sweat, and choosing to stay when leaving is easier. I taught you the same things. Now you teach the next person. That's how this works. That's how ranches last. Don't sell to developers no matter what they offer. Don't compromise the water rights. Don't stop teaching young people who need what you needed. Build something good. Pass it on. Make us proud. Caleb." He folded the letter, put it with Owen's letters in the box. Someday Wyatt would find it. Someday he'd understand what Caleb understood now. That legacy wasn't property transferred at death. It was wisdom transferred through life. It was the choice to value what mattered and protect it for people who weren't born yet. That evening, the Valley Ranchers organized a community gathering. They did it every year now, rotating properties, celebrating the end of summer and the beginning of fall work. This year it was at Caleb's place. 50 people showed up, families, kids, old-timers who remembered Owen and young ranchers learning the trade. They roasted beef from Caleb's herd, told stories, watched the sun set behind the mountains. At one point, someone asked Caleb to say a few words. He stood on the porch of the homestead cabin, looking out at the community Owen had helped build and protect. "I'm not good at speeches, but I want to say something about this valley, about what we're doing here. 30 years ago, I showed up at Owen Hartley's ranch with nothing. No skills, no prospects, no future. He gave me work, taught me everything he knew. And when he died, he gave me this land. Not because I was family, because I stayed. Because I loved the work, because I understood what he understood. That some things are worth more than money. This valley is full of people who understand that. Who choose hard work over easy profit. Who build things that last. That's rare. That's valuable. That's worth protecting. So thank you for being the kind of people who make this life possible, for raising kids who might choose ranching instead of tech jobs, for understanding that land is trust, not property. Owen would be proud of all of you. I know I am." People clapped. The gathering continued. Caleb sat back down next to Nora, felt her hand in his, and watched the community celebrate. These were his people. This was his life. Everything he'd built in 30 years of showing up and doing the work. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, Caleb walked out to the spring. The moon was bright enough to see by, water flowing clear and cold like it had for thousands of years. He knelt, drank, felt the cold spread through him. Owen's voice in his memory. "This water fed the land for thousands of years. Our job is to make sure it feeds it for thousands more." "I kept my promise," Caleb said to the night, to the spring, to Owen's ghost if ghosts were listening. "The water's protected. The land's working. The next generation is learning. You chose right, old man. I hope you know that." The spring kept flowing. The night stayed quiet. Caleb sat there until he started to feel the cold, then walked back to the cabin where Nora was waiting. 58 years old now. 31 years since he'd stumbled onto this ranch broken and desperate. He'd built a life here. Not a perfect life, but a real one. Work that mattered. People who mattered. Land that would outlast him and stay protected because he'd taught others to value it the way Owen had taught him. In the cabin, Nora was reading by the fire. She looked up when he came in. "You okay?" "Yeah, just saying goodnight to old friends. Owen and Ben, and everyone who built this place before me. You're part of that now. You know that, right? You're one of the builders." Caleb smiled. "I'm trying to be." He sat down next to her. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. The sounds of home. The sounds of a life earned through choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier. Tomorrow he'd wake before dawn, feed cattle, mend what needed mending, teach what needed teaching, build what needed building, same as he'd done for 3 decades, same as he'd do until he couldn't do it anymore. But tonight, he just sat with his wife by the fire in a cabin that had sheltered 5 generations of people who'd chosen land over money and work over ease. And he felt something he'd never felt in his first 27 years of life. He felt like he belonged, like he'd found what he was supposed to find, like he'd built what he was supposed to build. The ranch would go on. Wyatt would protect it. Emily would help. Marcus would model it on his own land. The chain would continue. The water would keep flowing. The cattle would keep grazing. And somewhere in the future, someone else would stand at this spring and feel what Caleb felt now. Gratitude, purpose, the weight and privilege of carrying something forward. Owen Hartley had started this by taking in a broken veteran. Ben Sawyer had continued it by trusting that veteran with land. Now Caleb was passing it on to Wyatt, to Emily, to Marcus, to everyone who understood that some things mattered more than profit. The fire burned down to coals. Nora dozed against his shoulder. Caleb stayed awake a while longer thinking about Owen's letter. "You were the son who stayed. That counts for everything." It did count. All of it counted. Every fence mended. Every calf birthed. Every young person taught. Every choice to protect instead of sell. Every morning waking before dawn because the cattle needed feeding. Every evening watching the sunset and feeling grateful for hard work and sore muscles and a life built from dirt and sweat and staying when it was hard. That was legacy, not property, not money, not even land, though the land mattered. Legacy was the choice to build something bigger than yourself and trust others to continue it. Caleb Stone, former Marine with a dishonorable discharge, former gambler running from debts, former nobody with no future, had built a legacy, had proved Owen right, had become someone worth the faith an old rancher had placed in him 30 years ago. The fire went out. The night got cold. Caleb carried Nora to bed, climbed in beside her, and fell asleep to the sound of wind in the pines and water flowing from a spring that had fed this land since before memory and would feed it long after he was gone. Morning would come. The work would continue. The legacy would grow. And somewhere Owen Hartley was nodding approval, satisfied that he'd chosen right, that the land was in good hands, that the son who stayed had earned every acre. That was enough. That was everything. That was the foreman's legacy.